In the shadowed halls of Ashford Manor, a cryptic note whispers of a cursed dagger. Hidden for centuries, its blade said to unlock secrets that could destroy a family's legacy. Enter Hercule Poirot, the master detective, summoned to unravel a web of lies, betrayal, and murder. Who among the manor's elite guests cunning Lady Eleanor, secretive Dr. Mortimer, or the guilt-ridden Charles knows the truth? As clues emerge from dusty crypts, twisted mazes, and burning libraries, each step pulls Poirot closer to danger. Will he find the dagger before its curse claims another victim? Or will the shadows of the past bury the truth forever? Dive into a tale of suspense, where every secret hides a motive and every answer sparks a new question. Chapter 1. The whispered clues rain fell in relentless sheets, drumming against the cobblestones of London's quieter streets. As Hercule Poirot adjusted his overcoat and stepped from the hansom cab, the evening air was thick with the scent of wet stone and coal smoke, a familiar perfume to the fastidious detective, though one he never quite embraced. His polished shoes clicked sharply against the pavement as he approached the towering iron gates of Ashford Manor, a sprawling estate on the city's outskirts, where grandeur and secrecy seemed to coexist in equal measure. The invitation, penned in elegant script and sealed with the Ashford crest, had arrived at his flat that morning. Its urgency veiled in polite formality. Lord Reginald Ashford, a man of wealth and enigma, requested Poirot's presence at a weekend gathering, hinting at a matter of utmost delicacy. Poirot's grey cells, as he liked to call them, had stirred at once. Sensing a puzzle worth unraveling, the gate swung open with a groan, revealing a gravel drive flanked by ancient yews, their branches sagging under the weight of the storm. A butler, rigid as a statue despite the downpour, awaited under a black umbrella. "Monsieur Poirot," he intoned, his voice barely rising above the rain's cadence. "Lord Ashford is expecting you. This way, if you please." Poirot, ever observant, noted the man's slight tremor, not from cold but from some unspoken tension. The little Belgian detective's mustache twitched as he followed, his mind already cataloging details: the butler's polished shoes, the faint scent of lavender on his gloves, the hurried glance toward the manor's upper windows. Inside Ashford Manor was a study in opulence. The entrance hall gleamed with polished marble, its walls adorned with tapestries depicting hunts and battles from centuries past. A chandelier, dripping with crystal, cast fractured light across the room, illuminating a grand staircase that spiraled upward like a promise of secrets. The butler led Poirot to a drawing room where a fire crackled in a massive hearth, its warmth doing little to dispel the chill of intrigue that hung in the air. Lord Reginald Ashford stood by the fireplace, a tall man with silver hair and a face etched with lines of both authority and weariness. Beside him stood Captain Arthur Hastings, Poirot's loyal friend and confidant, who had arrived earlier at Poirot's request to scout the terrain, as it were. "Poirot, my dear fellow," Hastings exclaimed, striding forward with his usual enthusiasm. "Good to see you. Though I must say, this place has a certain atmosphere, doesn't it?" His eyes twinkled, but Poirot detected a flicker of unease beneath the captain's hearty demeanor. "Monsieur Hastings, you are, as always, most perceptive in your own way," Poirot replied, his voice smooth as velvet. He turned to Lord Ashford, bowing slightly. "Monsieur, your invitation spoke of a matter most urgent." "Hercule Poirot is at your service." Ashford's gaze was steady, but his fingers tightened around the stem of a brandy glass. "Monsieur Poirot, your reputation precedes you. I require your unique talents to resolve a matter that threatens not only my family's honor, but perhaps something far greater." He paused, glancing at the door as if expecting an interruption. "It concerns a relic, a dagger, to be precise, hidden somewhere within this manor. Its existence is known only to a few, yet whispers of its power have drawn unwelcome attention." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "A dagger, you say? And what is this power of which you speak, monsieur?" Ashford hesitated, then lowered his voice. The dagger is said to reveal truths that have been buried for generations. It is no mere weapon, but a key to secrets that can unravel reputations, fortunes, even empires. My ancestors hid it to protect it from those who would misuse it. But now, I fear someone among my guests seeks it for their own ends. The room seemed to grow smaller. The fires crackled louder. Poirot's mind raced, piecing together the implications to hidden relic, a house full of strangers, and a host with secrets. It was, as he might say, a case most intriguing. And who, pray, are these guests? He asked, his tone deceptively mild. Ashford gestured toward a set of double doors. They await us in the dining room. Come, meet them, and perhaps your keen eye will discern what mine cannot. The dining room was a spectacle of elegance, its long mahogany table set with silver and crystal that gleamed under candle light. The guests, a dozen in all, turned as Poirot and Hastings entered, their faces a gallery of curiosity, suspicion, and guarded charm. Ashford introduced them with practiced ease, though Poirot noted the strain in his voice. There was Lady Eleanor Ashford, Reginald's younger sister, her sharp green eyes and poised smile suggesting a mind as quick as it was ruthless. Dr. Julian Mortimer, a historian with a gaunt face and ink-stained fingers, seemed to vibrate with nervous energy, his gaze darting to every corner of the room. Captain Lionel Harrow, a retired military man with a weathered face and a limp, stood rigidly, as if still on parade. Miss Clara Beaumont, the governess to Ashford's young niece, was a study in contrast, timid in posture but with eyes that held a quiet fire. Charles Ashford, Reginald's nephew and heir, lounged with the careless grace of youth, though his smile faltered under Poirot's scrutiny. The other scholars, distant cousins, and a solicitor named Mr. Grayson formed a tapestry of motives Poirot would soon unravel. Dinner was a lavish affair, with courses of pheasant, truffled soup, and delicate pastries, yet the conversation was anything but light. Lady Eleanor spoke of the manor's history, her words laced with pride and something darker. The Ashfords have always guarded their legacy, she said, her eyes flicking to her brother. Some secrets are worth protecting. Don't you agree, Monsieur Poirot? Indeed, madam, Poirot replied, slicing his pheasant with precision. But secrets, they have a way of demanding to be known, n'est-ce pas? It is only a matter of time and method. Dr. Mortimer coughed, nearly spilling his wine. Fascinating place, this manor. So many artifacts, so many stories. Have you ever considered, Lord Ashford, opening it to scholars, the history here? Could we write books? Ashford's smile was tight. Some histories are best left undisturbed, Doctor. Poirot observed the exchange, noting the undercurrents of tension. Hastings, ever the loyal assistant, leaned close and whispered, "Bit of a powder keg. This lot, eh? I'd wager half of them know more than they're letting on." "Patience, mon ami," Poirot murmured. "The truth, it reveals itself in the small things, the glance, the gesture, the word unspoken." As dessert was served, a footman entered, his face pale. He whispered to Ashford, who rose abruptly, excusing himself. Poirot's instincts prickled. Moments later, Ashford returned, holding a folded note. "Monsieur Poirot," he said, his voice low, "this was found in my study. I believe it concerns the dagger." The note, written in a hurried scrawl, read, "The shadow points at midnight, where the rose meets the stone." Poirot's fingers traced the words, his mind already dissecting their meaning. A riddle. He said softly, "Most interesting. And where, monsieur, is this rose and stone?" Ashford shook his head. "I don't know. The manor is vast, with many such symbols in its architecture. But midnight approaches, and I fear time is short." The guests murmured, some feigning the centerist, others leaning forward. Poirot stood, his small frame commanding the room. "Mesdames et messieurs, I propose we adjourn to the library. There, perhaps, we may find the key to this enigma. The night is young, and Hercule Poirot does not sleep when there is a puzzle to solve. The library was a cavern of knowledge, its shelves groaning under leather-bound tomes and manuscripts. A massive rose window dominated one wall, its stained glass casting crimson and gold across the room. Poirot paced, his eyes scanning every detail: the carved stone fireplace, the intricate parquet floor, the bust of long-dead Ashford staring blankly. The guests followed, their footsteps echoing, each watching the others with thinly veiled suspicion. "Monsieur Hastings," Poirot said, pausing by the window, "what do you observe about this rose?" Hastings squinted. "Well, it's a fine piece of work. The glass is old, medieval perhaps, but I don't see weight. There's a shadow." He pointed to the floor, where moonlight through the window cast a faint outline of the rose's petals, stretching toward the fireplace. "Precisement," Poirot said, his voice alight with satisfaction. He crossed to the fireplace, his fingers brushing the stone. A faint click sounded, and a panel slid open, revealing a narrow corridor cloaked in darkness. Dust motes danced in the sliver of light, and a chill draft carried the scent of age and secrets. The guests gasped, but Poirot raised a hand. "Mzamis, we have found the first step. This corridor. It is the path to the dagger, but it is not for all to tread. I, Hercule Poirot, shall explore it alone for now. Return to your rooms, and we shall reconvene at breakfast." Lady Eleanor's eyes narrowed. "You expect us to simply wait while you play detective?" "Madam," Poirot said, his tone firm yet polite, "I expect you to trust in the method of Hercule Poirot. The truth, it will not hide for long." As the guests dispersed, Hastings lingered. "You're sure about going in there alone, old chap? Looks a bit grim." Poirot smiled, adjusting his hat. "Fear not, mon ami. The gray cells, they are my lantern, and this corridor, it calls to me." He stepped into the darkness, the panel sliding shut behind him, leaving only the echo of his footsteps and the promise of answers to come. The corridor was narrow, its walls damp and lined with moss. Poirot's torch, provided by the butler, cast flickering shadows that seemed to dance with purpose. His steps were measured, each one a calculation, as he noted the faint scratches on the stone, the faint scent of wax lingering in the air. The corridor twisted, descending slightly, until it opened into a small chamber. There, on a stone pedestal, lay a single object, a parchment yellowed with age, its edges curling like petals. Poirot lifted it with care, his eyes scanning the elegant script. It was a poem, cryptic yet deliberate, each line a clue to the dagger's resting place. The first stanza read, "In shadows deep, where roses bloom, the stone will guard the blade's old tomb. At midnight's chime, seek north and true, the light will guide to what is due." Poirot's mustache twitched, a puzzle within a puzzle. He murmured. The chamber offered no further clues, but the parchment was enough. He tucked it into his coat, his mind already mapping the manor's layout, calculating where north and true might lead. The hour was late, and the manor's secrets were only beginning to unfold. But Poirot felt the thrill of the chase, the certainty that the dagger was within his grasp. He retraced his steps, emerging into the library just as the clock struck 1. The room was empty, the fire reduced to embers. Poirot sat at a writing desk, spreading the parchment before him. The night was far from over, but this first victory, the discovery of the corridor and the poem, gave him a foothold. The guests, he knew, were not all they seemed. Each held a piece of the puzzle, whether they knew it or not, and Poirot, with his meticulous method, would fit those pieces together. As he retired to his room, the rain still pattering against the windows, Poirot allowed himself a small smile. The game had begun, and Hercule Poirot was never one to lose. Chapter 2. Shadows in the gallery. Portrait gallery of Ashford Manor stretched before Hercule Poirot like a silent chronicle of time, its walls adorned with the stern visages of the Ashford lineage. The air was thick with the scent of aged wood and wax, and the faint creak of the floorboards beneath his polished shoes punctuated the stillness. The corridor, lit by flickering gas lamps, cast long shadows that danced across the gilded frames as if the ancestors themselves were stirring, whispering secrets to those who dared listen. Poirot's sharp eyes, glinting with the curiosity of a man who thrived on unraveling mysteries, scanned each portrait. The cryptic note from the previous evening, the one that had summoned him to this grand estate, still echoed in his mind. The dagger lies where shadows guard the truth. A riddle, of course, and Poirot relished such challenges, for they were the bread and butter of his unparalleled intellect. He paused before a portrait of Sir Reginald Ashford, the first of the line. Painted in 1623, the man's piercing gaze seemed to follow Poirot, his hand resting on the hilt of a sword that bore an uncanny resemblance to the dagger described. In the note, the weapon was no mere ornament. The note had spoken of a legendary dagger, said to possess the power to unveil secrets buried deep within the Ashford family's history. Poirot's mustache twitched as he leaned closer, noting the faint outline of a symbol etched into the swords. "Pommel a crescent moon entwined with a rose. Mon Dieu," he murmured. The first clue reveals itself. The gallery was not empty. Captain Hastings, Poirot's loyal, if somewhat unimaginative companion, trailed behind, his brow furrowed as he tried to keep pace with Poirot's deductions. "I say, Poirot, these paintings are a bit grim, aren't they? All these old chaps staring down at us gives me the creeps." Poirot turned, his expression one of mild exasperation. "Creeps, Hastings, non. These portraits are not mere decorations. They are Des Moines witnesses to the past. And witnesses, my friend, always have something to say, if one knows how to listen." Hastings blinked, clearly unconvinced. But Poirot was already moving to the next painting, that of Lady Beatrice Ashford, Sir Reginald's wife. Her delicate features were framed by a lace veil, but her eyes held a spark of defiance, as if she knew something the world did not. Poirot's gaze darted to the background of the painting, where a faint outline of a manor window overlooked the garden maze. The same maze, perhaps, mentioned in the note. He filed the observation away, his mind a meticulous ledger of details. The evening was to be marked by a dinner party, a gathering of the manor's eclectic guests, each of whom Poirot suspected harbored their own motives for seeking the dagger. Lord Reginald Ashford, the current patriarch, had invited a curious mix: aristocrats, scholars, and a few enigmatic figures whose presence seemed less about socializing and more about pursuit. Poirot adjusted his bow tie, ensuring it sat perfectly symmetrical, and prepared to observe the human chessboard that awaited him in the dining hall. The dining room was a spectacle of opulence, with a long mahogany table gleaming under the light of a crystal chandelier. The guests were seated, their faces a tapestry of guarded expressions and forced smiles. Lord Ashford, a man of robust build and a voice that boomed like a cannon, presided at the head of the table. To his left sat his sister, Lady Eleanor Ashford, a woman of sharp beauty and sharper wit, her emerald eyes scanning the room with the precision of a hawk. Across from her was Dr. Julian Mortimer, a historian whose obsession with the daggers lore was evident in the feverish way he clutched his wine glass. Beside him, Captain Harrow, a retired military man with a weathered face and a guarded demeanor, seemed more interested in his plate than the conversation. Miss Clara Wentworth, the shy governess to Lord Ashford's young niece, sat quietly, her hands folded tightly in her lap, while Charles Ashford, the Lord's nephew, lounged with a bored air that did little to mask his restlessness. Poirot, seated near the foot of the table, observed them all, his eyes darting from one to another, like a conductor orchestrating a symphony. The conversation began innocuously, with Lord Ashford regaling the group with tales of the manor's history. "The dagger, you see," he said, his voice rich with pride, "is no mere trinket. It is said to have been forged for a duel in 1642, a matter of honor that shaped the Ashford legacy. Some say it carries a curse, others a blessing. But all agree it holds secrets. Dr. Mortimer leaned forward, his spectacles glinting. The dagger's history is far more complex. Lord Ashford, my research suggests it was tied to a secret society, one that guarded knowledge the Ashfords wished to keep hidden. Its blade, they say, was etched with a map to a treasure or perhaps a truth dangerous to reveal. Lady Eleanor's laugh was sharp, cutting through the air like a shard of glass. Really, Dr. Mortimer, you and your fanciful theories. Next, you'll tell us the dagger can summon ghosts. Her tone was mocking. But Poirot noted the slight tightening of her jaw, a telltale sign of unease. Captain Harrow grunted, setting down his fork. Sounds like a lot of nonsense to me. A dagger's a weapon, nothing more. If it's hidden, someone's got a good reason to keep it that way. Poirot sipped his wine, his mind cataloging each reaction. The tension in the room was palpable, a web of rivalries and secrets that seemed to tighten with every word. Miss Clara, he noticed, had barely touched her food, her eyes darting nervously toward Lady Eleanor. Charles, meanwhile, was whispering something to a footman, his expression furtive. As the meal progressed, Poirot steered the conversation toward the dagger's last known location. This forgotten wing, Lord Ashford, he said, his voice smooth as velvet. The one mentioned in the note. It is, perhaps, a place of significance to the family. Lord Ashford hesitated, his fingers drumming on the table. The West Wing has been sealed for decades. My grandfather forbade anyone from entering, claiming it was unsafe. But the note, he trailed off, his eyes meeting Poirot's. You think it holds the key to the dagger? I think, mon ami, then it holds many things, Poirot replied, his tone enigmatic. And I intend to find out what. The dinner concluded with a strained politeness, the guests dispersing to their rooms or the drawing room for brandy. Poirot, however, had other plans. He slipped back to the portrait gallery, his steps silent on the thick carpet. The gas lamps had been dim, casting the corridor into a twilight of shadows. He returned to Lady Beatrice's portrait, his fingers tracing the frame. The note had spoken of shadows guarding the truth, and what better place for a shadow than behind a painting? With a gentle press, he tested the frame, feeling for any give. A faint click rewarded his efforts, and the portrait swung outward, revealing a hidden panel. Inside was a small brass key, its surface etched with the same crescent moon and rose symbol. Poirot's lips curved into a satisfied smile. Abine. The shadows began to speak. He pocketed the key, his mind racing with possibilities. The key was old, its design suggesting it unlocked something significant, perhaps a door, a chest, or even a safe. But its purpose was not yet clear, and Poirot knew better than to rush his deductions. He closed the panel, ensuring the portrait was undisturbed, and made his way back to the main hall. As he reached the staircase, a sound stopped him, a soft, deliberate footstep echoing from the corridor he had just left. He turned, his eyes narrowing, but the hall was empty, the shadows swallowing any trace of movement. Quelqu'un m'observe, he murmured, his hand tightening around the key in his pocket. Someone was watching, and Poirot was certain they knew more about the dagger than they let on. The night was still young, and the manor's secrets were only beginning to unravel. Poirot ascended the stairs, his mind a whirl of clues and suspicions. The key a tangible link to the mystery that lay ahead. The footsteps, though silent now, lingered in his thoughts, a reminder that in Ashford Manor, every shadow held a story, and every story held a danger. The following morning, Poirot rose early, his routine as precise as a Swiss clock. He dressed in his impeccable suit, adjusted his mustache with a small mirror, and descended to the breakfast room, where the guests were already gathered. The atmosphere was subdued, the previous night's tension simmering beneath the surface. Lady Eleanor was absent, her place at the table empty, which Poirot noted with interest. Dr. Mortimer, meanwhile, was poring over a notebook, his pen scratching furiously. While Captain Harrow stared out the window, his expression unreadable, Poirot helped himself to a modest breakfast of toast and tea, his eyes never straying far from the others. "Bon matin, Zamis," he said, his tone cheerful but laced with purpose. "I trust you all slept well." Miss Clare offered a timid smile, but her eyes were red-rimmed, as if she had spent the night in distress. Charles, on the other hand, was unusually animated, regaling Hastings with a story about a hunting trip gone awry. Poirot listened, his ears attuned to the nuances of their voices, the unspoken words that often revealed more than the spoken ones. After breakfast, Poirot requested a tour of the West Wing from Lord Ashford, who agreed with some reluctance. The wing was a labyrinth of dust-covered rooms, their furniture draped in sheets like ghosts frozen in time. The air was stale, heavy, with the weight of years, and the windows were shuttered, allowing only slivers of light to pierce the gloom. Poirot moved methodically, his cane tapping the floor as he examined each room. The key in his pocket seemed to grow heavier with every step, as if urging him toward its locked dot and a small study at the end of the wing. Poirot paused. The room was unremarkable, save for a heavy oak desk and a bookshelf lined with moldering volumes. But something about the desk caught his eye, a faint scratch on its surface, as if something had been dragged across it repeatedly. He knelt, his fingers tracing the mark, and noticed a small keyhole in the desk's side, barely visible unless one knew to look for it. "Voila," he said softly, producing the brass key. It fit perfectly, turning with a satisfying click. A hidden drawer sprang open, revealing a bundle of yellow letters tied with a faded ribbon. Poirot untied the bundle, his eyes scanning the elegant handwriting. The letters were from Lady Beatrice to an unnamed correspondent, speaking of a great burden and a blade that must never see light. One passage stood out: "The rose and moon shall guide you, but beware the one who watches from the shadows." Poirot's pulse quickened. The symbol on the key, the rose and moon, was no coincidence, but the warning about the watcher unsettled him. Was it a reference to the footsteps he had heard last night, or something more sinister? He tucked the letters into his coat, intending to study them later, and continued his exploration. The West Wing yielded no further clues, but Poirot was undeterred. The letters were a treasure trove, and he would decipher their meaning in due time. For now, he needed to return to the guests, to observe their interactions and probe their secrets. The afternoon brought a new development. Lady Eleanor reappeared, claiming she had been indisposed, but her composure was strained, her smile tight. Poirot watched her closely as they gathered in the drawing room for tea. She spoke little, her attention fixed on Dr. Mortimer, who was animatedly discussing a recent archaeological find. Poirot seized the opportunity to steer the conversation back to the dagger. "Dr. Mortimer," he said, his voice deceptively casual, "your knowledge of the dagger is most impressive. Tell me, have you ever come across a symbol in your research, a crescent moon entwined with a rose?" The historian froze, his teacup halfway to his lips. "A symbol, you say?" he stammered. "I'm not certain. Perhaps in passing." Poirot's smile was polite, but his eyes were sharp. "Vraiment, it is curious. None. Such a symbol might lead us closer to the dagger." Lady Eleanor's cup clattered against its saucer, drawing every eye. She laughed, a brittle sound. "Really, Monsieur Poirot, you do have a flair for the dramatic. Symbols and daggers, it's all rather like a penny dreadful, isn't it?" "Perhaps," Poirot replied. "But even penny dreadfuls contain truths, if one knows where to look." The room fell silent, the weight of his words settling over the guests like a fog. Poirot sipped his tea, his mind racing. The symbol, the key, the letters, all pieces of a puzzle that was slowly taking shape. But the watcher in the shadows remained a mystery, and Poirot knew he was running out of time to unmask them. As evening approached, Poirot returned to the portrait gallery, determined to uncover more clues. The gas lamps were lit once more, casting their familiar shadows. He examined each painting anew, searching for the rose and moon symbol in a portrait of Sir Henry Ashford, a later ancestor. He found it again, etched into a ring on the man's finger. The background of the painting showed a garden, and in the distance, the faint outline of a stone structure, a gazebo, perhaps, or a folly. Poirot's mind clicked into place. The garden, the maze, the letters had mentioned a burden hidden where the rose and moon converged. Could it be that the dagger was not in the manor at all, but outside, in the grounds? He resolved to investigate the garden at first light, but for now, he needed rest. The day had been long, and his gray cells required time to process. As he made his way to his room, the manor seemed to close in around him, its walls whispering secrets he had yet to decipher. The key in his pocket, the letters in his coat, the symbol in his mind, they were all threads in a tapestry of deceit, and Poirot was determined to unravel it. But the footsteps from the previous night haunted him, a reminder that someone else was playing this game, and they were watching his every move. The next day dawned gray and cold, the sky heavy with the promise of rain. Poirot, undeterred, ventured into the garden, Hastings at his side. The maze loomed ahead, its hedges towering like green sentinels. Poirot consulted the letters again, noting a reference to a place of solitude where the rose and moon were carved. The gazebo, he decided, was the most likely candidate. The garden was eerily silent, the only sound the crunch of gravel underfoot. Poirot's eyes scanned the landscape, taking in the manicured lawns, the rose bushes, the distant outline of the maze. The gazebo stood at the garden's edge, a delicate structure of stone and ivy. As they approached, Poirot noticed a carving on one of the pillars, a crescent moon entwined with a rose. Mon Dieu. Hastings, he said, his voice low with excitement. We are close. He examined the pillar, his fingers tracing the carving. It was worn but distinct, and beneath it, he found a small indentation, just large enough for the brass key. He inserted it, turning carefully, and a panel in the pillar slid open, revealing a narrow compartment. Inside was a single object, a velvet pouch, heavy with the weight of something metallic. Poirot opened the pouch, and there, glinting in the dim light, was a dagger. Its blade was etched with intricate designs, and its hilt bore the same rose and moon symbol. But as he lifted it, a shadow fell across the gazebo, and a voice hissed from behind. You should have left it alone, Monsieur Poirot. He turned, the dagger in hand, to find himself face to face with an unseen figure cloaked in the morning mist. The footsteps from the gallery, the watcher in the shadows, they were here, and Poirot's heart raced with the thrill of confrontation. Abine, he said, his voice steady despite the danger. It seems the shadows have come to claim their truth. The figure stepped closer, their face obscured, but Poirot's mind was already at work, piecing together the final clues. The dagger, the key, the letters, the symbol, they all pointed to this moment, and Hercule Poirot was ready to face whatever truth awaited. Chapter 3. The locked stud-ive heavy oak door of Lord Reginald Ashford's private study loomed before Hercule Poirot, its polished surface reflecting the dim light of the manor's gas lamps. The ancient key he had found behind the portrait, and the gallery fit snugly into the lock, its intricate grooves catching with a satisfying click. With a gentle push, the door swung inward, revealing a room untouched by time, its air thick with the scent of aged leather and ink. Poirot's gray cells buzzed with anticipation, for he knew that within these walls lay the next piece of the puzzle, surrounding the legendary dagger, a relic said to hold the power to unveil the Ashford family's darkest secrets. The study was a testament to Lord Ashford's meticulous nature. Bookshelves lined every wall, their shelves sagging under the weight of leather-bound tomes, their spines embossed with gold lettering. A massive mahogany desk dominated the center, its surface cluttered with papers, an inkwell, and a quill poised, as if its owner had only just stepped away. Above the desk hung a portrait of a stern-faced ancestor, his eyes seeming to follow Poirot's every move. A single window, its heavy velvet curtains drawn, allowed only a sliver of moonlight to pierce the gloom, casting long shadows across the room. Poirot adjusted his pince-nez and stepped inside, his polished shoes silent on the thick Persian rug. Captain Hastings, ever his faithful companion, followed close behind, his brow furrowed with curiosity. "I say, Poirot," Hastings whispered, his voice barely audible, "this place gives me the creeps. It's as if the walls themselves are hiding something." "Mon ami," Poirot replied, his tone calm, but laced with a hint of amusement. "The walls, they always have something to say, if one knows how to listen." And Hercule Poirot, he is an excellent listener. He moved toward the desk, his eyes scanning every detail of the alignment of the papers, the faint scratches on the wood, the faint scent of tobacco lingering in the air. This study, it is the heart of Lord Ashford's private world. If the Dagger's secrets are to be found, they will be found here. Hastings glanced around nervously, his hand resting on the hilt of an imaginary sword. "Do you think the dagger itself is hidden here? It's said to be cursed. You know, I heard one of the maids whispering about it, something about a duel that doomed the Ashfords centuries ago." Poirot waved a hand dismissively. "Curses, Hastings, are the inventions of minds too lazy to seek the truth. The dagger, it is real, but its power lies not in the supernatural, but in what it represents. A secret, perhaps, or a truth that someone wishes to remain buried. Now, assist me, if you please. We must search methodically." The two men set to work, Poirot with his characteristic precision and Hastings with a slightly less graceful enthusiasm. Poirot began with the desk, carefully lifting each paper to examine its contents. The documents were a mix of estate records, personal correspondence, and what appeared to be genealogical notes tracing the Ashford lineage back to the 17th century. One journal, bound in cracked leather, caught Poirot's eye. Its pages were yellowed, the ink faded but legible, and its entries spoke of a duel fought in 1673 between Sir Edmund Ashford and a rival, Lord Percival Dunmere. The duel, it seemed, had been over a woman, a lady of questionable virtue whose name was struck from the record. The dagger, described as having a hilt adorned with a ruby the size of a pigeon's egg, was said to have been the weapon that ended Dunmere's life, its blade stained with his blood. "Mon Dieu," Poirot murmured, his fingers tracing the words. "This dagger, it is more than a relic. It is a symbol of betrayal, of passion, of vengeance. But why, Hastings, does it remain hidden? And why now does someone seek it with such urgency?" Before Hastings could respond, a piercing scream shattered the silence, echoing through the manor's halls. Poirot's head snapped up, his eyes narrowing. "Vite, Hastings, that cry comes from the garden." The two men hurried from the study, Poirot locking the door behind them to ensure its secrets remained undisturbed. They descended the grand staircase, their footsteps muffled by the thick carpet, and emerged into the chilly night air. The garden, bathed in moonlight, was a labyrinth of neatly trimmed hedges and rose bushes, their thorns glinting like tiny daggers. A small crowd had gathered near a stone fountain, where a young maid, her face pale with terror, clutched a shawl around her shoulders. "It was there, sir," she stammered, pointing to a patch of earth beneath a rose bush. "I was fetching water for the kitchen when I saw it, a glove, all stained with blood." Poirot knelt beside the rose bush, his gloved hand carefully lifting the object in question. It was indeed a glove, made of fine leather, its cuff embroidered with a monogram. CH. The fabric was stiff with dried blood, the stain dark and ominous in the moonlight. Poirot's eyes gleamed as he examined it, turning it over in his hands. "Most curious," he said softly. "This glove, it tells a story, but not the whole story. We must find its owner." The crowd parted to reveal Captain Harrow, the guest with a murky military past, his face flushed from the cold door, perhaps from guilt. His broad shoulders and weathered features marked him as a man who had seen conflict, but his eyes darted nervously as Poirot approached. "Captain Harrow," Poirot said, his voice smooth but commanding. "This glove. It bears the initial CH. Might it belong to you?" Harrow's jaw tightened, but he met Poirot's gaze. "It's mine, all right," he admitted gruffly. "But I swear, I've no idea how it got here or why it's bloodied. I was in my room all evening, reading. You can ask the butler, he brought me a brandy not 2 hours ago." Poirot nodded, his expression unreadable. "The butler. He will be questioned, rest assured. But tell me, Captain, where were you before this evening? A man of your experience. He does not lose a glove so carelessly." Harrow hesitated, his hands clenching in the fists. "I was in the village this morning, visiting the inn. I had a drink, spoke to a few locals, nothing unusual. I must have dropped the glove then." Poirot's mustache twitched, a sign that his mind was working furiously. "We shall see, Captain, we shall see." He tucked the glove into his pocket, his fingers brushing against something else within a small, torn fragment of paper. He drew it out, revealing a piece of a map, its edges jagged as if torn from a larger whole. The fragment showed a winding path, unmistakably part of the estate's famous hedge maze. With a single word scrawled in ink, "Center, the maze," Poirot said, his voice barely above a whisper. "It calls to us, Hastings. The dagger, it seems, wishes to be found." As the crowd dispersed, Poirot and Hastings made their way toward the maze, its entrance marked by the towering yew trees. The fog was rolling in, thick and heavy, cloaking the estate in an eerie silence. Hastings shivered, pulling his coat tighter. "I don't like this, Poirot, that glove. The blood is all too convenient, don't you think? Someone's playing a game with us. We, Hastings," Poirot replied, his eyes fixed on the maze's dark entrance. "But Hercule Poirot, he is no pawn. Whoever has laid this trap, they will find that I am a most formidable opponent." The maze loomed before them, its paths twisting into darkness, the fog curling around the hedges like ghostly fingers. Poirot held the map fragment aloft, its faint lines barely visible in the moonlight. "The center," he murmured. "That is where we must go. But we must tread carefully, mon ami, for the path to truth is never without its dangers." With a final glance at the manor behind them, its windows glowing like eyes in the night, Poirot stepped into the maze, his mind as sharp as the dagger he sought. The air grew colder, the fog thicker, and the sound of their footsteps faded into the oppressive silence. Somewhere within the maze, the truth awaited, but so, perhaps, did the one who had left the blood-stained glove. As they navigated the first turn, Poirot's thoughts raced. The glove, the map, the journal, all were pieces of a puzzle, but the picture they formed was still unclear. Captain Harrow's alibi would need verification, but Poirot's instincts told him the captain was not the mastermind behind this affair. The monogrammed glove was too obvious, too deliberate. No, the true culprit was someone with a subtler mind, someone who knew the value of misdirection. The maze's paths twisted and turned, each edge indistinguishable from the next. Hastings, ever impatient, muttered under his breath about the folly of chasing shadows in the dark. But Poirot's focus never wavered. He held the map fragment close, its torn edges a constant reminder of the larger truth still hidden. After several minutes of careful navigation, they reached a fork in the path. Poirot paused, his eyes scanning the ground. A faint scuff mark in the dirt caught his attention, a recent footprint, its tread distinct from their own. "Someone has been here," Poirot said, kneeling to examine the mark. "And not long ago. The earth, it is still damp from the evening dew, yet this print is clear. We are not alone in this maze." Hastings gripped his walking stick, his eyes darting into the shadows. "Do you think it's the person who left the glove, or someone else entirely?" Poirot did not answer immediately. Instead, he rose and continued down the left path, his steps measured but purposeful. The maze seemed to tighten around them, its walls closing in as the fog grew denser. The silence was broken only by the occasional rustle of leaves, though whether it was the wind or something more sinister, Poirot could not yet say. After what felt like an eternity, they reached the center of the maze, a circular clearing with a stone bench and a small fountain. Its water long since dried up. In the center of the clearing stood a pedestal, its surface carved with the same symbol Poirot had seen in the journal, a dagger entwined with a rose. He approached it cautiously, his fingers tracing the carving. "This symbol," he said, "it is the key to the dagger's hiding place. But where is the lock it opens?" Hastings, ever practical, began searching the pedestal, his hands running over its smooth surface. "Perhaps there's a hidden compartment," he suggested, "like the panel behind the portrait." Poirot nodded, his eyes narrowing as he examined the pedestal's base. There, barely visible in the moonlight, was a faint seam in the stone. He pressed it gently, and with a soft click, a small section of the pedestal slid open, revealing a narrow slot, a trapdoor. Poirot said, his voice tinged with excitement. "But it requires a key or perhaps something else." He reached into his pocket, retrieving the ancient key from the study. It fit perfectly into the slot, and with a turn, the trapdoor opened fully, revealing a dark, narrow tunnel descending into the earth. The air that wafted up was damp and musty, carrying the scent of ancient stone and forgotten secrets. Hastings peered into the darkness, his face pale. "You're not suggesting we go down there, are you, Poirot? It looks like a tomb." "And perhaps it is." "Mon ami," Poirot replied, his voice steady. "But the dagger, it is close. I can feel it. We must—" His words were cut off by a sudden rustle behind them. Poirot spun around, his hand raised to silence Hastings. The fog parted briefly, revealing a shadowy figure at the edge of the clearing. Before Poirot could call out, the figure lunged, a glint of metal flashing in their hand. Poirot dodged with surprising agility for a man of his stature, the blade missing him by inches. The figure vanished into the maze, their footsteps fading into the fog. "After them," Hastings cried, but Poirot held up a hand. "No, Hastings. To chase is to fall into their trap. We have what we came for." He pointed to the open trapdoor. "The dagger lies below, I am certain, but we must proceed with caution. Our adversary, they are clever, and they are close as they prepare to descend." Poirot's mind raced. The attack had been no accident, it was a warning, or perhaps a desperate attempt to stop him. The locket, the glove, the map all were threads in a web of deception, and Poirot was determined to unravel it. He took a deep breath, his mustache quivering with resolve, and stepped into the tunnel, the darkness swallowing him as Hastings followed close behind. The tunnel was narrow, its walls rough-hewn stone, slick with moisture. Poirot held a small flashlight, its beam cutting through the gloom. The air grew colder as they descended, the silence oppressive. After several minutes, the tunnel opened into a small chamber, its walls lined with ancient carvings, scenes of duels, betrayals, and a dagger that matched the description in the journal. In the center of the chamber stood a stone plinth, and atop it, a small wooden box, its surface etched with the same dagger Andros symbol. Poirot approached the box, his heart pounding. "The dagger," he whispered. "It is here." But as he reached for the box, a faint click echoed through the chamber. The ground beneath them trembled, and a section of the wall began to slide open, revealing another passage. Poirot froze, his hand hovering over the box. "A trap," he said softly. "Or perhaps another clue." He turned to Hastings, his eyes gleaming with determination. "We are close, mon ami. But the game, it is not yet over. The dagger, it is within our grasp, but so too is danger. We must proceed with the utmost care." As they stood in the chamber, the fog from above seemed to seep into the tunnel, curling around their feet like a living thing. Poirot's mind was a whirlwind of deductions, each clue sliding into place like the pieces of a jigsaw. The blood-stained glove, the map fragment, the locket, the attack all were part of a larger pattern. one that Poirot was determined to unravel before the night was through. He lifted the box from the plinth, its weight surprisingly light. With a steady hand, he opened it only to find it empty save for a single, folded note. He unfolded it carefully, revealing a single line of text: "The dagger sleeps where the roses weep." Poirot's eyes narrowed, his mind racing. "The roses," he murmured. "The garden, perhaps, or another place within the estate. The clue. It is clever. But Hercule Poirot is more so." He tucked the note into his pocket, his resolve unshaken. The dagger was still out there, and with it, the truth. As he and Hastings retraced their steps through the tunnel, the fog thickened, the maze's walls looming like silent sentinels. The night was far from over, and Poirot knew that the next clue would lead them deeper into the heart of the Ashford families, secrets and closer to the one who sought to keep them buried. The journey back to the manor was silent, each man lost in thought. Poirot's mind was a storm of possibilities, each clue a thread in the tapestry of the case. The blood-stained glove pointed to Captain Harrow, but its placement was too deliberate, too staged. The map fragment had led them to the maze, but the attack suggested someone was watching, waiting for them to get too close, and the locket's significance was still unclear. But Poirot sensed it held the key to the dagger's true purpose. As they emerged from the maze, the manor loomed before them, its windows dark save for a single light in the upper hall. Poirot paused, his eyes fixed on the light. "Someone is awake," he said softly, "and they are waiting for us." Hastings nodded, his hand tightening on his walking stick. "What's our next move?" Poirot's mustache twitched, a faint smile playing on his lips. "We return to the manor, mon ami, and we watch the dagger. It is close, but so too is our adversary. Hercule Poirot does not rest until the truth is revealed." With that, they stepped out of the fog and into the night, the manor's silhouette, a silent witness to the secrets it held. The case of the hidden dagger was far from solved, but Poirot's gray cells were alight with purpose, and he would not rest until every shadow had been banished by the light of truth. Chapter 4. The maze of motif-esque fog hung low over the Ashford estate, a thick, silvery veil that clung to the hedges of the maze, muffling the world beyond. Hercule Poirot stood at the entrance, the torn fragment of the map clutched in his gloved hand. The jagged edges of the paper, stained with the faintest trace of earth, seemed to pulse with secrets. His sharp eyes scanned the twisting paths ahead, their high green walls looming like silent sentinels. The air was damp, carrying the scent of wet leaves and something sharper, perhaps the lingering trace of the blood-stained glove found in the garden. Poirot's mustache twitched as his mind churned, piecing together the puzzle of the hidden dagger. The map fragment, discovered inside the glove, was maddeningly incomplete. Its faded ink traced only a portion of the maze, with a single marked point near what appeared to be its heart. A small, cryptic symbol, a circle bisected by a jagged line, sat at the center of the mark. Poirot had seen such a symbol before in the journals from Lord Ashford's study, where it was linked to the dagger's legend. The relic, said to have been forged in the aftermath of a 17th century duel, was no mere blade. It was a key to truths the Ashford family had buried for generations, and now someone among the manor's guests was desperate to claim it. Poirot adjusted his hat, its brim shielding his eyes from the mist, and stepped into the maze. The gravel crunched softly beneath his polished shoes, each step deliberate, as if the ground itself might whisper a clue. The maze was a marvel of design, its paths curling and doubling back in patterns that seemed to defy logic to an untrained mind. It was a labyrinth of confusion, but to Poirot, it was a puzzle begging to be solved. His fingers traced the edge of the map fragment as he moved, his mind mapping the unseen turns ahead. The silence was broken by a faint rustle, like fabric brushing against leaves. Poirot froze, his head tilting slightly. The sound came from deeper within the maze, to his left. He turned, his small frame moving with surprising agility, and followed the path toward the noise. The fog thickened, curling around the hedges. like ghostly fingers. But Poirot's focus was unshakable. He had long ago learned to trust his senses, to let his little gray cells guide him through the murkiest of mysteries. The path opened into a small clearing, where a stone bench sat beneath an ancient yew tree. Its gnarled branches cast eerie shadows, and for a moment, Poirot thought he saw a movement, a flicker of a dark coat disappearing around a corner. He stepped forward, his eyes narrowing, when a new sound reached him. Voices, low and urgent, carried on the damp air. He crept closer, pressing himself against the hedge to avoid detection. The voices belonged to Lady Eleanor Ashford and her nephew, Charles, their words sharp with tension. "You cannot sell it, Charles," Lady Eleanor hissed, her voice a blend of authority and exasperation. "The estate is not yours to barter away like some trinket at a market stall." Charles's reply was laced with defiance. "And what would you have me do? And let it crumble while we cling to old legends. The dagger, if it's real, could fetch enough to save us. You know the debts are piling up." Poirot's lips pursed. So, the young Charles Ashford was desperate enough to consider selling the very estate that anchored his family's legacy. And the dagger, it seemed, was not just a relic, but a potential salvation in his eyes. But why the secrecy? Why the argument here, in the heart of the maze, far from prying ears? Poirot's mind catalogued the exchange, filing it alongside the bloodstained glove and the map fragment. The voices grew softer, and Poirot edged closer, careful to keep his silhouette hidden. Lady Eleanor's tone shifted, colder now. "If you pursue this, Charles, you'll regret it. There are forces at play you cannot comprehend. The dagger is more than a prize, it's a curse." Charles scoffed, his voice rising. "A curse? You sound like that fool Mortimer, prattling on about ancient duels and ghostly retribution. I'm not afraid of stories, and I'm afraid of bankruptcy." The conversation ended abruptly, replaced by the sound of footsteps retreating in opposite directions. Poirot waited, his breath steady, until the silence returned. He stepped into the clearing, his eyes scanning the ground for any trace of the exchange. A glint caught his attention, a small, metallic object half buried in the dirt near the bench. He knelt, his gloved fingers brushing away the earth to reveal a locket, its surface engraved with delicate initials, EM and J.R. Poirot's brow furrowed. A lover's locket, perhaps, but whose? The initials did not immediately align with any guest he had met, though he could point to Eleanor. Yet something told him this was no mere keepsake. He slipped the locket into his pocket, its weight a tangible reminder of the mystery deepening around him. The map fragment indicated a point not far from the clearing, and Poirot resumed his journey, his steps quicker now. The maze seemed to tighten around him, the hedges closing in as the path grew narrower. At last, he reached a dead end, where a stone wall rose, half covered in ivy. In its center was a carved symbol, the same circle and jagged line from the map. Poirot's fingers traced the carving, feeling for any irregularity. His touch was rewarded with a faint click, and a section of the wall shifted, revealing a hidden alcove. Inside, the air was stale, heavy with the scent of earth and time. A small pedestal stood at the alcove's center, its surface etched with faint runes. Poirot leaned closer, his eyes catching the glint of something beneath the pedestal, a trapdoor, cunningly concealed in the stone floor. He knelt again, his fingers probing the edges until he found a latch with a soft groan. The trapdoor lifted, revealing a narrow tunnel descending into darkness. Poirot hesitated. The tunnel was no place for a man of his fastidious nature, with its damp walls and uncertain depths, yet the dagger called to him, its secrets tugging at his insatiable curiosity. He was about to descend when a sudden rustle behind him made him spin, his hand instinctively reaching for the small cane. He carried a gentleman's accessory, but also a discreet weapon. A shadow loomed in the fog, and before Poirot could react, a figure lunged. He ducked, his agility belying his age, and the assailant stumbled, crashing into the hedge. Poirot caught a glimpse of a dark scarf obscuring the figure's face before they vanished into the maze, leaving only the sound of retreating footsteps. His heart pounded, but his mind remained clear. Someone did not want him to find the dagger, or perhaps they wanted it for themselves. Bruised but undeterred, Poirot returned to the trapdoor. He produced a small flashlight from his coat, its beam cutting through the gloom. The tunnel was cramped, its walls slick with moisture, but it sloped gently downward, leading somewhere beneath the estate. He descended carefully, his senses alert for any sign of pursuit. The air grew colder, and the faint drip of water echoed. In the distance, the tunnel opened into a small chamber, its walls lined with ancient stone. At its center stood a wooden chest, its surface carved with the same symbol as the alcove above. Poirot approached, his flashlight sweeping over the chest's intricate design. It was locked, but the mechanism was old, rusted. With a delicate touch, he probed the lock with a thin tool from his pocket, coaxing it open with a satisfying click. Inside was a single item, a folded parchment, yellowed with age. Poirot unfolded it carefully, revealing a detailed drawing of the dagger's hilt, its blade adorned with the same circle and line symbol. Below the drawing was a single line of text, written in elegant script: "The truth lies where the shadow falls." Poirot's lips curved into a faint smile, a clue, cryptic yet promising. The parchment offered no map, no clear direction, but it confirmed the dagger's existence and its importance. He tucked it into his coat, alongside the locket, and retraced his steps to the maze's surface. The fog had thickened, cloaking the estate in an eerie stillness, but Poirot's mind was alight with possibilities. Emerging from the maze, he dusted off his coat, his composure restored. The locket, the parchment, the ambush, all were pieces of a puzzle that was growing more intricate by the hour. The initials EM and J are not at him. Were they a clue to the dagger's guardian or its thief? And who had attacked him in the maze? The bloodstained glove, the map fragment, and now the locket and parchment all pointed to a web of motives, woven through the Ashford family and their guests. Poirot returned to the manor, his steps purposeful. The evening was young, and the guests would soon gather for dinner. He would use the occasion to observe, to probe, to let his little gray cells unravel the threads of deceit. The locket's owner was his next target, and he suspected the shy governess, Miss Clara, might hold the key. Her quiet demeanor had not escaped his notice, nor had the flicker of fear in her eyes when the dagger was mentioned. As he entered the manor, the grand chandelier cast golden light across the hall, but the warmth did little to dispel the chill of suspicion. The hidden dagger was close. Poirot could feel it, and with it, the truth would come to light. Chapter 5. The midnight confession. The grand clock in the entrance hall of Lord Ashford's estate told midnight, its resonant chime echoing through the cavernous manor like a solemn heartbeat. Hercule Poirot stood alone in the drawing room, the locket from the maze glinting in his hand under the flickering light of a single candelabrum. Its delicate silver surface was etched with the initials EM, a lover's token that seemed to pulse with secrets of its own. The storm outside had begun to gather strength, its distant rumbles promising a tempest that would soon lash the estate. Poirot's gray cells, as he so fondly called them, were alight with the puzzle before him. The locket was a key not to a door, but to a truth buried in the tangled web of motives that enveloped the Ashford household. He had summoned the guests to the drawing room, a calculated move to stir the pot of suspicion and provoke a reaction. The air was thick with tension as they filed in, their faces a gallery of unease, curiosity, and guarded calculation. Lord Reginald Ashford, his broad shoulders slumped with the weight of the evening, as mysteries took his place by the fireplace. Lady Eleanor, his sister, glided in with her usual air of imperious calm, her emerald gown catching the firelight like a serpent's scales. Dr. Mortimer, the historian with an unhealthy fixation on the dagger's lore, fidgeted with his spectacles, his eyes darting to the corners of the room. Captain Harrow, his military bearing rigid despite the late hour, stood near the window, his gaze fixed on the darkening horizon. Charles Ashford, the young nephew with a penchant for gambling, lounged in an armchair, his nonchalance a thin veneer over his unease. And then there was Miss Clara, the shy governess, whose delicate frame seemed to shrink under the weight of the room's scrutiny. Poirot held up the locket, letting it dangle from its chain like a hypnotist's pendulum. "Miss," he began, his voice soft yet commanding, "this locket, found in the maze, is no mere trinket. It is a clue, a whisper from the past that speaks of love, betrayal, and perhaps the very dagger we seek. I ask now who among you knows its story." The room fell silent, save for the crackle of the fire and the distant howl of the wind. Lady Eleanor's lips tightened, her eyes narrowing. As she studied the locket, Dr. Mortimer adjusted his spectacles again, a nervous tick that Poirot noted with interest. Charles shifted in his seat, his fingers drumming a restless rhythm on the armrest. Captain Harrow remained statue still, but his jaw clenched, betraying a flicker of emotion. Only Miss Clara reacted visibly, her pale face flushing as her hands twisted in her lap. "Monsieur Poirot," Clara said at last, her voice trembling like a leaf in the storm, "that locket, it belonged to my mother." A murmur rippled through the room. Poirot's mustache twitched, a subtle sign of his satisfaction. He had anticipated a reaction. But Clara's admission was a spark that threatened to ignite the powder keg of secrets. "In the manner, your mother, Mademoiselle Clara," he prompted gently, stepping closer. "Pray, tell us more, the truth. It is the only path to clarity." Clara's eyes glistened with unshed tears, and she clasped her hands tightly, as if to anchor herself against the tide of memory. "My mother, Eliza Mayhew, was a servant here at Ashford Manor. 20 years ago, she was dismissed under mysterious circumstances. I was only a child then, but I remember her speaking of a locket, a gift from someone she loved. She never told me who, but she said it was her most precious possession. When she died, I kept it, but I lost it years ago or so, I thought." Poirot's gaze softened, but his mind was racing. "And how, mademoiselle, did this locket find its way to the maze?" Clara shook her head, her voice breaking. "I don't know. I swear it. I haven't seen it since I was a girl. Someone must have taken it, or found it and placed it there." Lady Eleanor's voice cut through the air like a blade. "This is absurd, Poirot. A servant's trinket. Surely this has nothing to do with the dagger. You're chasing shadows." Poirot turned to her, his eyes gleaming with a quiet intensity. "Madam, in my experience, it is the smallest shadows that cast the longest truths. Mademoiselle Clara's story is but a thread in the tapestry. We must follow it." He paced slowly before the fireplace, the locket still in hand, his mind weaving together the fragments of the evening, the dagger, the locket, the maze, the blood-stained glove, the coded riddle. They were all pieces of a puzzle that pointed to a deeper motive. But whose and why? The guests were hiding something, each of them, and Poirot knew that the key to unraveling the mystery lay in pressing the right nerve. "At the right moment, permit me to propose a theory," he said, stopping abruptly and facing the group. "This locket, it is tied to the Ashford family, a servant, dismissed under mysterious circumstances, a lover's gift, a secret kept for 2 decades. Perhaps this locket is not merely a memento, but a clue to the dagger's curse, a curse that some in this room may wish to keep buried." Dr. Mortimer cleared his throat, his voice strained. "The dagger's curse is a myth, Monsieur Poirot, a fanciful tale to explain the Ashfords' misfortunes. My research, your research, Doctor," Poirot interrupted smoothly, "is most thorough, yet it seems to consume you. Why such passion for a myth, HMM, unless you believe there is truth in it?" Mortimer flushed, his hands fidgeting. "I study history, not superstition. The dagger is a relic of immense value, nothing more. And yet," Poirot continued, his voice dropping to a near whisper, "someone in this manor values it enough to hide it, to steal it, perhaps to kill for it. The locket, I think, will lead us to that someone, The room grew colder. The storm outside now a steady roar. Poirot's words hung in the air, and he watched the guests closely, noting every twitch, every glance. Charles avoided his gaze. Staring at the floor, Captain Harrow's fist clenched briefly before relaxing. Lady Eleanor's expression was unreadable, but her eyes burned with a quiet fury. Clara, trembling, seemed on the verge of collapse. Poirot decided to press further. "Mademoiselle Clara, you say your mother was dismissed. For what reason?" Clara hesitated, her voice barely audible. They said she stole something. A piece of jewelry, I think. But she swore she was innocent. She said it was a lie to cover up something else, something the Ashfords didn't want known. Lord Reginald, who had been silent, stirred at this. "Enough," he said, his voice heavy with authority. "This is ancient history. Poirot, my father dealt with that matter. The girl's mother was a thief, and she was sent away. There's no connection to this Dagger nonsense." Poirot raised an eyebrow, his tone polite but probing. "And yet, Monseigneur, the locket appears in the maze, near the very symbol that points to the dagger. A coincidence? Perhaps." Poirot does not believe in coincidences. The tension in the room was palpable now, a taut wire ready to snap. Poirot knew he was close to a breakthrough, but he needed more. He needed to shake the tree and see what fell. "I propose," he said, "that we search Mademoiselle Clara's room. If she is innocent, as she claims, there will be nothing to fear." Clara's eyes widened in panic. "My room? But I've told you everything. I don't know how the locket got there." Lady Eleanor rose, her voice icy. "This is outrageous. Poirot, you accuse a governess based on a trinket. You go too far." Poirot smiled thinly. "Madam, I accuse no one. I seek only the truth, if Mademoiselle Clara permits. A brief search will clear her name." Clara, after a moment's hesitation, nodded. "I have nothing to hide," she whispered. Poirot led the group to Clara's modest room and the servants' quarters. A small space with a single bed, a wardrobe, and a desk cluttered with books and papers. The storm battered the window, casting eerie shadows across the walls. Poirot's eyes swept the room, taking in every detail: the faded wallpaper, the worn rug, the neatly folded clothes. He moved to the desk, his fingers brushing over the papers, searching for anything out of place. It was Hastings, ever the loyal companion. "Who noticed it first?" "Poirot," he said, pointing to a small wooden box tucked beneath a stack of books. "What's that?" Poirot lifted the box, its surface unremarkable but for a faint carving of a rose, matching the design on the locket. He opened it carefully, revealing a folded piece of paper. Unfolding it, he found a sketch, a detailed drawing of a dagger's hilt, its intricate filigree unmistakable. The same dagger described in the Ashford journals. The room erupted in gasps. Clara's hand flew to her mouth. "That's not mine," she cried. "I've never seen it before." Poirot held up a hand, silencing the room. "Calm yourselves, Zamis. This sketch is a clue, not an accusation. But it raises a question: how did it come to be here? In Mademoiselle Clara's room, someone, perhaps, wishes to cast suspicion upon her." He turned to Clara, his voice gentle but firm. "Mademoiselle, you must tell me everything you know. Every detail, no matter how small. The truth. It is your ally." Clara sank onto the bed, her shoulders shaking. I don't know how it got there. But my mother, she used to tell me stories about the dagger. She said it was cursed, that it brought ruin to anyone who touched it. She said the Ashfords hid it to protect themselves, but also to protect others. I thought they were just stories. But after finding the locket, I'm not so sure." Poirot nodded, his mind racing. The sketch was a deliberate plant, he was certain. Someone in the manor was orchestrating a game, using Clara as a pawn to divert attention from their own actions. But who? Lady Eleanor, with her cunning and ambition. Dr. Mortimer, with his obsessive knowledge. Charles, with his debts and desperation. Or perhaps Captain Harrow, whose stoic demeanor hid a past Poirot had yet to unravel. He returned to the drawing room, the sketch and locket in hand, and gathered the guests once more. The storm was now a full-throated roar, rain lashing the windows and sheets. Poirot stood before the fireplace, his silhouette sharp against the flames. "Zamis," he said, "we are close to the heart of this mystery. The locket and the sketch are threads that lead us to the dagger, but they also lead us to a truth that someone in this room fears. I ask you now, speak, or the truth will find you." The silence that followed was heavy, broken only by the storm's fury. Poirot's eyes moved from face to face, searching for the crack in the facade. It was Clara who spoke first, her voice stronger now, fueled by a resolve Poirot had not seen in her before. "My mother wasn't a thief," she said, standing. She was dismissed because she knew too much. She saw something, heard something about the dagger and the Ashford's secrets. They sent her away to silence her. But she left me the locket as a reminder. I think she wanted me to find the truth. Lord Reginald's face darkened. "This is nonsense, Clara. Your mother was a servant who overstepped her bounds. There's no conspiracy here." But Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Monseigneur, the truth is often inconvenient, but it cannot be buried forever. Mademoiselle Clara's story aligns with the clues we have found: the locket, the sketch, the symbol in the maze. Someone in this manor is protecting a secret, and they will stop at nothing to keep it hidden." The room seemed to close in, the air thick with suspicion. Poirot knew he had struck a nerve, but he also knew the danger was growing. The person behind this game was watching, waiting, and perhaps planning their next move. He needed to act quickly, to follow the trail before it went cold. He turned to Hastings, his voice low. "Mon ami, we must search the estate's archives tomorrow. The journals in Lord Ashford's study mentioned a family record, a chronicle of the dagger's history. If we can find it, we may uncover the truth about Eliza Mayhew and the locket." Hastings nodded, his face grim. "And what about the guests, Poirot? One of them is behind this, aren't they?" Poirot's mustache curved in a faint smile. Hastings. But which one? That is the question. For now, we watch, we listen, and we wait. The storm outside is fierce, but the storm within this manor is fiercer still." As the guests dispersed, their footsteps echoing in the silent halls, Poirot remained by the fireplace, the locket and sketch in his hands. He traced the initials in with his finger, his mind turning over the possibilities. Eliza Mayhew, a servant dismissed for knowing too much. A locket, a lover's gift. Hidden in the maze, a sketch planted to incriminate Clara. And the dagger, always the dagger, lurking at the heart of it all. He moved to the window, staring out at the storm. Lightning illuminated the grounds, casting the maze in stark relief. Somewhere out there, or perhaps within these very walls, the truth was waiting. Poirot's gray cells hummed with anticipation, for he knew that the midnight confession was only the beginning. The night stretched on, the storm unrelenting. Poirot retired to his room, but sleep eluded him. He sat at the small desk, sketching a timeline of events on a piece of paper. The cryptic note, the coded riddle, the hidden panel, the ancient key, the blood-stained glove, the map fragment, the locket. The sketch each was a point on the timeline, leading inexorably to the dagger. But the timeline was incomplete, missing the crucial link that would tie it all together. He thought of Clara, her trembling voice and earnest eyes. She was no mastermind, but her mother's story was the key. Eliza Mayhew had been dismissed to protect a secret tied to the dagger's curse. Was it a scandal, a crime, or something deeper? The Ashfords' wealth and status were built on centuries of intrigue, and Poirot suspected the dagger was more than a relic. It was a symbol of their power, and perhaps their shame died as the storm reached its peak. A particularly loud crack of thunder shook the manor, and Poirot's thoughts turned to the other guests. Lady Eleanor's composure was a mask. He was certain, hiding a mind as sharp, and dangerous as a stiletto. Dr. Mortimer's obsession with the dagger bordered on mania. But was it genuine or a cover for something else? Charles's debts made him vulnerable, a pawn in someone else's game. And Captain Harrow, with his shadowed past, was a cipher Poirot had yet to crack. He rose, pacing the room, his mind a whirl of possibilities. The sketch in Clara's room was a deliberate act, meant to divert suspicion. But it was sloppy, too obvious. The true culprit was cleverer, someone who knew the manor's secrets and how to manipulate them. Poirot's thoughts returned to the maze, the alcove, the carved symbol. The trapdoor beneath it led to a tunnel, but he had been ambushed before he could explore it. That attack was no accident, it was a warning, or perhaps a desperate act. To protect the dagger's hiding place, he stopped, his eyes narrowing. The tunnel, it was the next step. Tomorrow, he would return to the maze, with Hastings and perhaps a few trusted servants, to explore the tunnel and uncover its secrets. But he would need to be cautious. The person behind this was watching, and they were dangerous. Poirot sat again, his pen moving swiftly as he added to his timeline. He wrote Eliza Mayhew and dismissal in bold letters, circling them. Beside them, he jotted lover and secret. The locket's initials, EM, were a clue. But to what? A lover. Perhaps. But who? An Ashford, a guest. Or someone long gone, buried in the manor's past. He leaned back, his eyes half closed, letting his gray cells work. The storm outside was a fitting metaphor for the chaos within the manor. But Poirot thrived in chaos. It was where patterns emerged, where the truth revealed itself in the smallest details, the twitch of a lip, the flicker of a glance, the weight of a silence. As the clock struck 2, Poirot made a final note on his timeline. The dagger is close. He felt it, an instinct honed by years of unraveling mysteries. The dagger was not just a relic, but a catalyst, drawing out the greed, fear, and ambition of those around it. And Poirot, with his unerring sense of justice, would find it and the truth it guarded. He extinguished the candle and lay back on the bed, the storm's rhythm lulling him into a light sleep. His dreams were filled with mazes and daggers, lockets, and secrets, and the faces of the guests, each hiding a piece of the puzzle. Tomorrow, he would take the next step, and the truth would be one step closer. The storm raged on, but Hercule Poirot was undeterred. The midnight confession had set the stage, and the play was far from over. Chapter 6. The crypt's secret air in the manor had grown heavy with suspicion, each guest casting wary glances at the others as the storm outside gathered strength. Hercule Poirot, ever composed, adjusted his perfectly pressed lapel and surveyed the drawing room where the group had assembled after dinner. The fire crackled, casting flickering shadows on the oak-paneled walls. But it did little to warm the chill of mistrust that permeated the estate. The cryptic clues surrounding the legendary dagger said to hold the power to unveil the Ashford family's darkest secrets had drawn Poirot deeper into a labyrinth of motives and hidden truths. Now, with the sketch of the daggers held in hand, discovered in Miss Clara's room, Poirot's gray cells were alight with purpose. He had spent the morning poring over the sketch, its intricate details suggesting a connection to the manor's ancient crypt. The drawing, meticulously rendered, depicted a hilt adorned with a spiral of ivy and a single, prominent Rubian emblem that matched a description in one of Lord Ashford's journals. The journal had hinted at a resting place for the dagger, a relic tied to a 17th century duel that had cursed the Ashfords with misfortune. Poirot, however, was not one to be swayed by tales of curses. To him, every mystery was a puzzle, and every puzzle had a solution grounded in logic and observation. Mon ami, Poirot said to Captain Hastings, who stood by the window, peering into the rain-soaked gardens. The crypt, it calls to us. The sketch, it is not merely a drawing, it is a map to the truth. We must descend into the shadows of the past to find our answers. Hastings turned, his brow furrowed. The crypt, that old, gloomy place under the chapel. Gives me the creeps. Poirot. Are you sure the dagger's down there? Poirot's mustache twitched with the faintest hint of a smile. Certain, none. Hastings. But the crypt, it is the logical next step. The symbol on the sketch, it matches the one I observed in the maze. And the journals, they speak of a tomb, sealed and forgotten, where the dagger may lie. We shall see what secrets it holds. The manor's chapel. A small stone structure adjacent to the main house stood at the edge of the estate's sprawling grounds. Its weathered spire pierced the gray sky and the stained glass windows, though beautiful in daylight, now glowed dimly under the storm's oppressive weight. Poirot and Hastings, armed with lanterns and the sketch, made their way through the rain, their footsteps muffled by the sodden grass. The chapel door, heavy in oak, groaned as Hastings pushed it open, revealing a musty interior lit only by the faint flicker of their lanterns. The air inside was cold, damp, and thick with the scent of stone and decay. Rows of pews, worn smooth by centuries of use, led to a modest altar at the far end. Behind it, a narrow stone staircase spiraled downward into darkness, the entrance to the crypt. Poirot's eyes gleamed with focus as he adjusted his grip on the lantern. Careful, Hastings, he murmured. The past. It does not always welcome visitors. The staircase was steep, its steps uneven and slick with moisture. Hastings, ever the loyal companion, muttered under his breath about the wisdom of traipsing into crypts in the middle of a storm. But he followed Poirot nonetheless. The descent felt endless, the air growing colder with each step, until they emerged into a low-ceilinged chamber lined with stone sarcophagi. The crypt was a maze of its own, with alcoves branching off into shadows, each containing the remains of long-dead Ashfords. Cobwebs draped the walls like lace, and the faint drip of water echoed somewhere in the distance. Poirot held up the sketch, comparing it to the surroundings. His gaze settled on a large tomb at the far end of the crypt, its surface carved with the same ivy and ruby motif as the dagger's hilt. The tomb was sealed with a heavy stone slab, its edges worn but intact, and inscribed with a Latin epitaph, an umbris veritas, in shadows, truth, voila. Poirot said softly, his voice barely above a whisper. The tomb. It speaks to us. This is where the dagger rests, or where it once did, but we must be precise. Hastings, the epitaph. It is a clue. Hastings squinted at the inscription, his Latin rusty at best. Truth in shadows. Sounds like something you'd say, Poirot. But how does it help us find the dagger? Poirot's eyes narrowed as he traced a finger along the carved ivy. The epitaph. It is not mere decoration. It suggests a hidden truth, one that lies beneath or within. We must look closer. Perhaps there is a mechanism, a secret compartment. He knelt beside the tomb, his lantern casting a warm glow across the stone. His fingers explored the edges, pressing gently, searching for any sign of a hidden catch. After several minutes, a faint click echoed in the crypt, and a small section of the tomb's base slid open, revealing a narrow recess. Inside was a bundle of aged cloth, wrapped tightly around an object. Poirot's heart quickened as he carefully unwrapped it, expecting to see the glint of the dagger's blade. But the cloth fell away to reveal only a small, ornate key, its surface etched with the same ivy motif. Another key, Hastings exclaimed, his voice tinged with frustration. Poirot, this is getting ridiculous. Keys, clues, hidden panels. When do we find the actual dagger? Poirot held the key up to the light, his expression unperturbed. Patience, Hastings. Each key, it unlocks a piece of the puzzle. This one, I suspect, will lead us to the altar in the chapel above. The journals, they spoke of a resting place beneath the altar. Come, we must return. They ascended the staircase, the storm's rumble growing louder as they emerged into the chapel. The altar, a simple slab of stone, bore no obvious signs of a hiding place. But Poirot was undeterred. He examined its edges, his fingers probing for any irregularity. At last, he found a faint groove, barely visible in the dim light. "Hastings," he said, "assist me. We must lift the slab. Together." They strained against the heavy stone, their efforts rewarded as it shifted slightly, revealing a narrow cavity beneath. Poirot lowered his lantern, illuminating a small, dusty box nestled within. His heart raced. This was it, the moment of truth. With careful precision, he lifted the box and placed it on the altar. The key from the crypt fit perfectly into its lock, and with a soft click, the lid sprang open. But the box was empty. Poirot's mustache twitched, not in disappointment, but in contemplation. "Empty," he said, his voice calm, but not without purpose. "Regard as Hastings, there is an inscription inside." He tilted the box toward the lantern, revealing words etched into the wood. "To the mill, where shadows turn." Hastings groaned. "The mill? That old ruin in the village?" "Poirot, this is a wild goose chase, non mon ami," Poirot replied, his eyes gleaming. "It is a chase, yes, but the goose, it is not so wild. The dagger, it has been moved, perhaps to protect it, perhaps to hide it from those who seek its power. We must go to the mill." The storm had worsened by the time they returned to the manor to gather their coats and inform Lord Ashford of their intentions. The other guests, still gathered in the drawing room, were restless. Lady Eleanor, her sharp eyes darting between Poirot and the others, seemed particularly agitated. Dr. Mortimer, the historian, sat in a corner, his face pale, his fingers nervously tapping the arm of his chair. Poirot noted their behavior, but said nothing, his mind already turning to the village. As they prepared to leave, a commotion erupted. Dr. Mortimer, claiming a sudden illness, announced his intention to return to his lodgings in the nearby town. Poirot, ever observant, noticed the historian's trembling hands and the way his eyes avoided contact. "Monsieur Mortimer," Poirot said smoothly, "I trust you will recover swiftly. Perhaps we shall see you in the village, non?" Mortimer muttered a vague reply and hurried out into the rain, his departure raising Poirot's suspicions further. With a discreet nod to Hastings, Poirot slipped a small tracking device courtesy of a contact in Scotland Yard into the lining of Mortimer's coat as he brushed past. "We shall keep an eye on him." "Hastings," Poirot whispered, "is haste. It is most revealing." The village was a short drive from the estate, its cobbled streets slick with rain. The abandoned mill, a crumbling structure on the outskirts, loomed like a specter against the stormy sky. Its windows were boarded, its wheel long since stilled. But Poirot's instincts told him it was the key to the next piece of the puzzle. Inside, the air was thick with dust and the scent of rotting wood. Their lanterns cast eerie shadows as they navigated the mill's interior, stepping over broken beams and scattered debris. Poirot's sharp eyes caught traces of recent activity. A footprint in the dust, a scrap of cloth caught on a nail, a faint smudge of ink on a table. "Someone has been here," he said, kneeling to examine the footprint. "And not long ago. The dagger. It was brought here, perhaps to be hidden or sold." A faint noise, a creak from the upper floor made Hastings start. "Did you hear that, Poirot? We're not alone." "Indeed, Hastings," Poirot replied, his voice low. "But we must proceed with caution. The shadows, they hide many things." They climbed a rickety staircase to the mill's upper level, where a small room overlooked the river. There, Poirot found a coded ledger tucked behind a loose board, its pages filled with cryptic symbols and numbers. "A record," he murmured, flipping through it, "of transactions, perhaps, or movements. The dagger, it seems, is part of a larger scheme, a secret society, perhaps, as the journal suggested." Before he could decipher more, a shadow moved in the doorway. Poirot spun, his lantern illuminating the figure of a cloaked man, his face obscured. "You're too late, Poirot," the man hissed, his voice low and menacing. "The dagger is beyond your reach." With surprising agility, the figure bolted, disappearing into the storm. Hastings gave chase, but the man was gone, swallowed by the rain and darkness. Poirot, undeterred, pocketed the ledger and turned to his friend. We return to the manor. Hastings, the ledger. It will tell us more, and Dr. Mortimer, I suspect, will have much to explain. Back at the estate, the atmosphere was electric with tension. The fire in the library, discovered just as Poirot and Hastings returned, had been contained, but not before it destroyed several shelves of books. Lord Ashford was distraught, Lady Eleanor furious, and the other guests whispered of sabotage. Poirot, however, was focused. He retreated to his room with the ledger, his mind racing as he began to decode its contents. The ledger revealed a network of transactions, coded references to the Dagger's movements, and names, some familiar, some not. Among them was a mention of EA, initials that matched Lady Eleanor Ashford. Poirot's lips curved into a faint smile. The web, it tightens, he said to himself. The dagger, it is close. But so too are those who seek to keep it hidden. As the storm raged outside, Poirot traced the tracker's signal to a warehouse in the nearby town. Dr. Mortimer, it seemed, had not gone far. The chapter closed with Poirot preparing to leave for the warehouse, his mind sharp with focus, his lantern casting a steady light against the darkness. The dagger was near, and with it, the truth. The night was far from over. Chapter 7. The empty casket air in the crypt was thick with dust, stirred by the faint draft that followed Poirot as he lifted the heavy altar slab. The stone groaned under its own weight, revealing a small, intricately carved wooden box nestled in a hollowed-out recess beneath. Hastings, standing at Poirot's shoulder, let out a low whistle. Is that it, Poirot? The dagger's hiding place? Poirot's gloved fingers traced the box's edges, his sharp eyes noting the delicate engravings of ivy and serpents that curled across its surface. Perhaps, mon ami, he murmured, his voice steady despite the quickening of his pulse. But the solution to a mystery is rarely so simple as lifting a lid. With a gentle tug, he freed the box from its resting place and set it on the altar's edge. The wood was cool to the touch, its polish dulled by centuries of neglect. The crypt's silence pressed in around them, broken only by the faint drip of water somewhere in the shadows. Hastings shifted impatiently. Well, go on, then open it. Poirot's lips curved into a faint smile. Patience, Hastings. A treasure such as this demands respect. He examined the box for any sign of a lock or trap, his fingers probing for hidden mechanisms. Finding none, he carefully lifted the lid. The hinges creaked, and both men leaned forward, anticipation hanging heavy in the air. The box was empty. Hastings groaned, running a hand through his hair. Empty? After all that, Poirot, are you sure we're in the right place? Poirot's eyes gleamed in the dim light of the lantern they brought. Oh, I am quite certain. Mon cher, the Latin epitaph, the symbol from the maze, the key from the gallery, all have led us here. But an empty box, it tells a story. He tilted the box toward the light, inspecting its interior. The velvet lining was faded, its once rich crimson now a muted pink. But something caught his eye, a faint inscription carved into the wood beneath the lining. Barely visible, he leaned closer, his magnifying glass in hand. Regard as Hastings. Words, hidden where none would think to look. The inscription was in an archaic script, its letters shallow but precise. To the mill, where shadows grind truth into dust. The mill, Hastings frowned. There's no mill on the estate, is there? Poirot closed the box with a soft snap. Not on the estate, perhaps, but nearby. The village of Ashford Hollow lies but a mile from here, and I recall from our arrival a mention of an old mill, long abandoned. It is there, I think, we must next turn our attention. Hastings looked skeptical. But why move the dagger? If it was hidden here, safe for centuries, why take it to some crumbling mill? Poirot's mustache twitched. That, mon ami, is the question, and to answer it, we must consider not only the where, but the who. Someone has been one step ahead of us. And I suspect our friend Dr. Mortimer knows more than he has let on. He tucked the box under his arm, motioning for Hastings to follow. Come, we must return to the manor and gather our thoughts. The night grows late, and the trail grows warm. The journey back to the manor was brisk, the chill of the late autumn air biting at their faces as they crossed the estate's sprawling grounds. The moon hung low, casting long shadows that danced across the frost-dusted grass. Poirot's mind was already turning, piecing together the fragments of the puzzle. The empty box, the inscription, Dr. Mortimer's sudden flight from the estate, it all pointed to a deeper game. One played not for the dagger's mythical curse, but for something far more tangible. Back at the manor, the household was in a state of uneasy quiet. The guests had retired to their rooms, though Poirot suspected few were sleeping. The events of the day, the scream in the garden, the blood-stained glove, the map fragment had left a pall over the estate. Lady Eleanor, Charles, Clara, and the others were all pieces on the board. But Poirot had yet to discern the full shape of the game. He and Hastings settled in the library, a fire crackling in the hearth to ward off the chill. Poirot placed the empty box on a table, its presence a silent challenge. Now, Hastings, he said, settling into a high-backed chair, let us consider. The dagger was here, beneath the altar, for many years, yet someone has removed it. And recently, I think, the inscription in the box suggests the mill. But why? To hide it further? To sell it? Or perhaps to protect it? Hastings rubbed his chin. Protect it from what? That secret society you mentioned earlier? Precisement. Poirot's eyes narrowed. The journals in Lord Ashford's study spoke of a group, a shadow within the shadows, sworn to guard the dagger's secret. If they exist, they would not take kindly to our interference. And Dr. Mortimer, he paused, tapping his fingers against the armrest. His obsession with the dagger's lore is no mere academic curiosity. I suspect he is either a member of this society or its pawn. Hastings leaned forward. So, what's the plan? We head to the mill and hope the daggers. There, Poirot shook his head. Not yet. First, we must confirm Dr. Mortimer's movements. His departure was too sudden, too convenient. I placed a small tracking device in his coat pocket before he left a precaution. You understand. We shall see where he has gone. In the meantime, we must visit the village. The locals may know more about this mill than they realize. The next morning, Poirot and Hastings set out for Ashford Hollow, a quaint village nestled in a valley just beyond the estate's borders. The village was a cluster of stone cottages, their chimneys puffing smoke into the crisp air. The local inn, the Rusty Plough, was the heart of the community, and it was there that Poirot directed their steps. The innkeeper, a stout man named Mr. Barlow, greeted them with a wary nod. His apron was stained with ale, and his eyes flicked nervously toward the door as Poirot began his inquiries. The old mill, you say, Barlow said, wiping a glass with a rag. Aye, it's been abandoned since my granddad's time. Falling to bits. It is. Nobody goes there, except maybe the odd tramp or poacher. Poirot's smile was disarming. And yet, monsieur, I have reason to believe someone has been there recently. A gentleman, perhaps, tall, with a scholar's bearing, fond of historical artifacts. Barlow hesitated, then leaned closer, lowering his voice. You mean that Mortimer fellow? I saw him yesterday, skulking about the village. Met some bloke near the mill. He did. Didn't get a good look at the other one, kept his hood up, like he didn't want to be seen. They were talking low, sounded urgent, didn't catch much, but I heard Dagger and society mentioned. Poirot's eyes gleamed. Most interesting. And this mill, where might we find it? Barlow pointed them toward a narrow path leading out of the village, winding through a copse of skeletal trees to the ruins of the old mill. The structure loomed against the gray sky, its wheel long stilled, its stone walls crumbling under the weight of ivy. The air carried the faint scent of damp wood and decay inside. The mill was a maze of broken beams and rusted machinery, Poirot moved with purpose, his cane tapping against the uneven floor as he scanned for signs of recent activity. Hastings followed, his revolver tucked discreetly in his coat. "This place gives me the creeps," he muttered. "Feels like we're being watched." Poirot did not reply, his attention fixed on a pile of disturbed dirt near the base of the mill's central shaft. He knelt, brushing away the soil to reveal a small trapdoor, its edges freshly scraped. "Regard as Hastings, someone has been here, and not long ago." He lifted the trapdoor, revealing a shallow compartment containing a leather-bound ledger. Its pages yellowed, but intact, the ledger was written in code, a series of symbols and numbers that Poirot recognized as a variation of a cipher he'd encountered in a previous case. "This will take time to decipher," he said, slipping the ledger into his coat. "But it confirms one thing. The dagger was moved, and recently. The question is, by whom, and to where?" As they prepared to leave, Poirot's sharp ears caught a faint sound of rustle, like fabric brushing against stone. He held up a hand, silencing Hastings. The sound came again. From the shadows near the mill's entrance, Poirot moved swiftly, his cane raised like a weapon, and peered into the gloom. A figure darted out, cloaked in dark clothing, vanishing into the trees before either man could give chase. Hastings cursed under his breath. Who was that? Mortimer? Poirot shook his head. "I think not. Mortimer is no athlete." And that figure moved with the agility of youth. No, this was someone else, someone watching us, perhaps sent by the same hand that moved the dagger. He turned back to the mill, his expression resolute. "We return to the manor, Hastings. There is much to consider, and I fear our time grows short." Back at the estate, the atmosphere was electric with tension. The guests had gathered in the drawing room, their faces a mix of curiosity and dread. Lady Eleanor sat by the fire, her posture regal but her eyes darting nervously. Charles paced near the window, his hands stuffed in his pockets. Clara, the governess, sat quietly, her hands folded in her lap, while Captain Harrow polished his monocle with exaggerated care. The other guests, minor aristocrats and scholars, whispered among themselves, casting glances at Poirot as he entered. He wasted no time. "Mesdames et messieurs," he began, his voice commanding attention. "The trail of the hidden dagger has led us to a most intriguing discovery. The dagger is no longer in the crypt, but I have found evidence that it was recently moved to the old mill in Ashford Hollow. I have also learned that Dr. Mortimer, our absent friend, was seen there, meeting with a mysterious figure. I ask you now, does anyone know more of this mill, or of Dr. Mortimer's activities?" The room fell silent, but Poirot's keen eyes caught the flicker of unease in Charles's expression. The young man shifted, his jaw tightening. "I don't know anything about the mill," he said, too quickly. "Mortimer was always going on about the dagger, mad for it. He was probably off chasing some old legend." Poirot nodded, his smile enigmatic. "Perhaps. And yet, I wonder. The dagger is no mere legend, and its value, both historical and financial, is considerable. One might be tempted to relocate it." Before Charles could respond, a shout came from the hallway. A footman burst in, his face pale. "Fire! The library's on fire!" Chaos erupted. Guests scrambled to their feet, shouting as the acrid smell of smoke drifted into the room. Poirot and Hastings moved swiftly, following the footman to the library, where flames licked at the shelves, devouring the ancient books and manuscripts. The fire was contained but fierce, centered on a pile of papers near the desk where Poirot had left the empty box. "Quickly, Hastings," Poirot barked, seizing a heavy curtain to smother the flames. Together, they worked with the staff to douse the fire, salvaging what they could. Among the charred remains, Poirot found a singed letter, its wax seal broken but legible. It bore a single name, Charles Ashford. Hastings stared at the letter. "Charles, he's behind this." Poirot's eyes narrowed as he scanned the letter's contents. It appears so. This is a correspondence between Charles and an unknown party, discussing the dagger's removal to the mill and its potential sale. Charles, it seems, is in debt a considerable sum. If this letter is to be believed, he planned to sell the dagger to settle his obligations. They returned to the drawing room, where Charles was still pacing. Unaware of their discovery, Poirot held up the letter, his voice cutting through the murmurs. "Monsieur Charles, perhaps you would care to explain this." Charles froze, his face draining of color. I don't know what you're talking about." "Do not insult the intelligence of Hercule Poirot," he said sharply. "This letter, found in the library fire, names you as the one who orchestrated the dagger's removal. You sought to sell it, did you not? To whom and why?" The room was deathly silent. Charles's shoulders slumped, and he sank into a chair. "All right," he muttered. "I wasn't over my head. That's gambling, mostly. Someone approached me, said they'd clear it all if I got them the dagger. I didn't want to, but they threatened me, said they'd ruin me, expose everything to my aunt." Poirot's gaze was unrelenting. "And who was this someone?" Charles shook his head. "I don't know. They never showed their face. Letters, mostly, left in my room. Instructions. I was supposed to meet them at the mill, but Mortimer got there first. I swear, I didn't start that fire." Poirot's mind raced. The fire was no accident. It was meant to destroy evidence, perhaps the very letter he now held. But who had set it? Charles, to cover his tracks, or someone else, protecting a larger scheme? And where was Dr. Mortimer? He turned to Hastings. "The tracker, mon ami. We must see where it leads us. Dr. Mortimer is the key, I think, to unlocking this mystery." Using a discreet device, Poirot checked the tracker's signal. It pinpointed a location in a nearby town, a rundown warehouse on the edge of Ashford Hollow. "We go now," Poirot said, his voice firm. "The dagger is close, and so is the truth." The drive to the warehouse was tense, the night cloaking the countryside in darkness. The building loomed ahead, its windows dark, its walls streaked with grime. Poirot and Hastings approached cautiously, the tracker's signal steady. Inside, the air was thick with the smell of oil and dust. Faint whispers reached their ears, urgent and low. Poirot motioned for silence. Creeping closer to the source, in a dimly lit corner, two figures stood, their voices hushed but intense. One was unmistakably Dr. Mortimer, his tall frame hunched over a crate. The other was cloaked, their face obscured. Poirot strained to hear their words. "The dagger is safe," Mortimer was saying, "but we must move it again. Poirot is too close." The cloaked figure hissed, "You fool. You led him here. The society will not forgive this." Poirot's heart quickened. The society confirmation of his suspicions. He stepped forward, his cane tapping sharply against the floor. "Bonsoir, messieurs. I believe you have something that belongs to the Ashford estate." The figures froze, then scattered. Mortimer bolted for a side door, while the cloaked figure vanished into the shadows. Poirot gave chase, but his quarry was swift, disappearing into the night. He turned back to the crate, where a small safe sat, its lock gleaming in the faint light. With Hastings' help, he opened it, revealing a velvet pouch. Inside was the dagger, or so he thought. But as he lifted it, he saw it was a replica, expertly crafted but lacking the weight and patina of the true relic. "A decoy," he muttered, his mind racing. "The real dagger is still out there." The chapter ends with Poirot standing in the warehouse, the replica in his hand, his mind sharp with focus. The whispers of the deal, the fire, the society, it all pointed to a larger conspiracy, one he was determined to unravel. He tucked the replica into his coat, his gray cells humming as he prepared to return to the manor, where the true dagger and the truth awaited. Chapter 8. Flames of deception. The air in the manor thickened with the acrid scent of smoke, curling through the grand hallways like an uninvited guest. Hercule Poirot stood at the edge of the library, his sharp eyes narrowing as flames licked the edges of the ancient oak shelves, their tongues darting hungrily toward the leather-bound volumes that held centuries of Ashford family secrets. The crackle of fire was punctuated by the shouts of servants rushing with buckets of water, their efforts feeble against the growing inferno. Captain Hastings, ever loyal, stood beside Poirot, his face a mask of alarm. "Mon ami," Poirot said, his voice calm despite the chaos. "We must act swiftly. There are documents in this library that may yet hold the key to the daggers. Whereabouts? To lose them would be to lose the thread of this tangled mystery." Hastings nodded, already rolling up his sleeves. "Right, Poirot. Let's get in there before it's all ash." The library was a cavernous room, its high ceilings adorned with intricate plasterwork now obscured by a haze of smoke. The shelves, towering like sentinels, groaned under the weight of countless tomes, some dating back to the manor's founding in the 16th century. Poirot's gaze swept the room, calculating. He had studied the library's layout earlier, noting the section on Ashford family history near the far wall, where Lord Reginald's private collection was kept. If any clue to the dagger's location remained, it would be there. "Follow me, Hastings," Poirot instructed, pulling a handkerchief from his pocket and tying it over his mouth. "We must reach the family records. The fire, it is no accident. It is a deliberate act to conceal the truth." They moved quickly, dodging fallen embers and weaving through the maze of shelves. The heat was oppressive, pressing against Poirot's neatly tailored suit, but his focus remained unshaken. His mind, those famous gray cells, churned with possibilities. Who among the guests had the motive to set this fire? The answer, he suspected, lay in the documents they were racing to save. At the far end of the library, a heavy mahogany cabinet stood, its glass doors smudged with soot. Poirot pointed to it. "There, Hastings. The Ashford journals. Help me." Together, they pried open the cabinet, the heat warping the wood and making the lock stubborn. Inside, stacks of leather-bound journals and loose papers lay in orderly rows, untouched by the flames but threatened by the encroaching blaze. Poirot grabbed an armful, passing them to Hastings, who stuffed them into a satchel slung over his shoulder. A loud crack resounded above a beam giving way under the fire's assault. "Poirot, we've got to go," Hastings urged, coughing. As the smoke thickened, "A moment," Poirot replied, his eyes scanning the cabinet's interior. His fingers brushed against a hidden panel at the back, a subtle irregularity in the wood. With a deft press, the panel clicked open, revealing a small compartment. Inside lay a single letter, its wax seal broken, but bearing the Ashford crest. Poirot slipped it into his pocket just as another beam groaned ominously. "Now, Hastings," Poirot shouted, and they bolted for the door, the satchel heavy with rescued documents. They emerged into the hallway, coughing and blinking against the clean air. As servants doused the flames with renewed vigor, the fire, though fierce, had not yet consumed the entire library, and Poirot noted with satisfaction that their efforts had preserved much of value. Once safely in the drawing room, Poirot and Hastings spread the rescued documents on a table, the other guests gathering around, their faces a mix of relief and suspicion. Lady Eleanor, her silk gown slightly disheveled, clutched a glass of brandy, her eyes darting nervously. Charles, Lord Ashford's nephew, stood with his arms crossed, his expression unreadable. Dr. Mortimer, the historian, hovered at the edge of the group, his fingers twitching as if itching to seize the papers. Miss Clara, the governess, stood quietly, her face pale but composed, while Captain Harrow, the military man, barked orders to the servants still battling the fire. Poirot opened the letter from the hidden compartment, his movements deliberate. The paper was old, its edges yellowed, but the handwriting was clear, penned in a hurried script. He read aloud, his voice cutting through the murmurs of the group, to Mayer. "Beware the dagger's lure. Its power is a myth, But its theft is a crime. The society guards it still, and their reach is long. Trust not the scholar, nor the kin who covets. The mill holds the truth, but only for those who see beyond the flame. The room fell silent, the weight of the words settling over them. Poirot's eyes flicked to Dr. Mortimer, whose face had gone ashen, and then to Charles, whose jaw tightened imperceptibly. The mill. Poirot mused, folding the letter. It is the same mill mentioned in the village where Dr. Mortimer was seen. In this society, it confirms the ledger we found, does it not, Hastings? Hastings nodded, pulling the coded ledger from the satchel, the one from the mill. Yes, it mentioned a group moving the Dagger to protect it. But who are they? Poirot turned to the group, his mustache twitching as he addressed them. Mesdames et messieurs, the fire was no accident. It was set to destroy this letter and the journals. To hide the truth of the Dagger's movements, someone among us knew. These documents would expose them. Gasps rippled through the room. Lady Eleanor's glass trembled in her hand. That's preposterous, Monsieur Poirot. Why would anyone here do such a thing? Why, indeed, Poirot replied, his tone mild but his eyes sharp, perhaps because the Dagger is not merely a relic, but a key to power or wealth. The letter speaks of a society, and I suspect its members are closer than we think. He turned to Charles. Monsieur Charles, you have been vocal about selling the estate. A valuable artifact like the Dagger would fetch a high price. None? And your debts, they are well known in certain circles. Charles flushed, his hands clenching. How dare you? I'd never burn my own family's legacy. Perhaps not, Poirot said, raising a hand. But someone coerced you, did they not? A threat. Perhaps, against those debts. Charles froze, his eyes widening. The room's attention shifted to him, and Poirot pressed his advantage. Speak, monsieur. The truth will serve you better than silence. After a tense pause, Charles slumped into a chair, running a hand through his hair. All right, Poirot, I'll tell you. Someone's been blackmailing me. They knew about my debts I took to keep the estate afloat after my uncle's mismanagement. They said if I didn't help them get the Dagger, they'd ruin me. I didn't set the fire, I swear. But I passed them information about the manor's layout. And who is this they? Poirot asked, his voice like a scalpel. I don't know. Charles burst out. They sent notes, always unsigned. They knew private things about the family. I thought it might be someone here, but I couldn't be sure. Poirot nodded, his mind racing. The letter's warning about the kin who covets pointed to Charles, but his confession suggested he was a pawn, not the mastermind. The reference to the scholar nodded him, and his gaze settled on Dr. Mortimer, who had edged toward the door. Dr. Mortimer, Poirot called, halting the historian's retreat. You have been most interested in the Dagger's lore. Perhaps too interested, non? The letter warns against the scholar, and you were seen at the mill, where the Dagger was last moved. Mortimer's eyes darted, his hands fumbling with his spectacles. I was researching. The mill has historical significance. I meant no harm. Yet you fled the estate after the crypt, Poirot said, stepping closer. And now, with the fire. You are nervous. Why, monsieur? Before Mortimer could respond, Poirot reached into his pocket and produced the small tracker he had planted on the historians' code during their earlier encounter. This, Mzamis, has told me where Dr. Mortimer has been, not just the mill, but a warehouse in the nearby town of Eldridge, a place, I suspect, where deals are made in shadows. The room erupted in murmurs, but Poirot raised a hand for silence. Hastings, prepare the car. We go to Eldridge at once. The Dagger is close, and so is the truth. The drive to Eldridge was tense, the night air cool against Poirot's face. As he sat beside Hastings in the hired motor car, the tracker's signal had led them to a rundown warehouse district, where dim lights flickered through grimy windows. Poirot's mind pieced together the puzzle, the letter, the ledger, Charles's confession, and Mortimer's suspicious behavior. The society was real, and its members were among the manor's guests. But who led them? They parked a short distance from the warehouse, approaching on foot. The building was old, its brick facade crumbling, but faint voices carried from within. Poirot gestured for Hastings to stay low, and they crept to a side window. Peering through a crack in the boarded-up glass dot inside, Dr. Mortimer stood in a pool of lamplight, speaking in hushed tones to a figure Poirot couldn't quite make out. A table between them held a small, ornate box the same size as the one found empty in the crypt. Poirot's heart quickened. The dagger was here. "Hastings," he whispered, "we must be cautious. This is the moment of truth." They circled to a side door, which creaked as Poirot eased it open. The voices inside grew clearer, and Poirot caught fragments of their conversation. "The buyer will pay handsomely. The society must remain secret. The manor cannot know." Poirot stepped into the light, his voice cutting through the whispers like a blade. "Bonsoir, Mzamas. I regret to interrupt your negotiations, but the game, it is up." Dr. Mortimer spun around, his face a mask of shock. The other figure turned, and Poirot's breath caught. It was Lady Eleanor, her elegant features twisted with fury. In her hand, she held a small pistol, its barrel glinting in the dim light. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, her voice cold, "you are too clever for your own good." "Perhaps," Poirot replied, unfazed, "but cleverness is my trade, and deception is yours, Lady Eleanor. You are the mastermind, the one who orchestrated the theft of the dagger, using Dr. Mortimer's obsession and Charles's desperation as your tools." Eleanor's lips curled into a sneer. "You have no proof, though." "But I do," Poirot said, tapping his temple. "The letter warned of the kin who covets, and you, madam, have long desired to control the Ashford legacy. The fire was your doing, to destroy evidence of your plot. And this warehouse, it is where you plan to sell the dagger to your mysterious buyer." Mortimer stammered, "I didn't know she planned to sell it. I thought we were protecting it for the society." "Silence, you fool," Eleanor snapped, raising the pistol. "Poirot, you will not leave this warehouse alive." Hastings tensed, but Poirot remained calm, his eyes locked on Eleanor's. "Madam, you underestimate Hercule Poirot. The local police, they are already on their way, summoned by a discreet call I made before entering. Your escape, it is impossible." Eleanor's hand wavered, her resolve crumbling as the distant wail of sirens grew louder. Poirot seized the moment, stepping forward and disarming her with a swift motion, his agility belying his fastidious appearance. Hastings rushed to secure Mortimer, who offered no resistance, his shoulders slumping in defeat. The police burst in moments later, their lanterns illuminating the scene. The ornate box on the table was opened, revealing the dagger, its blade etched with intricate symbols, gleaming as if untouched by time. Poirot handed it to the officer in charge, his expression one of quiet triumph. As Eleanor and Mortimer were led away in handcuffs, Poirot turned to Hastings. "Mon ami, the truth, it is a powerful thing. The dagger is safe, but the motives of the heart, they are never so simple." They returned to the manor at dawn, the sky streaked with pink and gold. The guests were gathered in the drawing room, their faces a mix of relief and disbelief as Poirot recounted the night's events. Charles, now cleared of direct involvement, vowed to restore the estate's honor. Clara, her connection to the dagger's history revealed, thanked Poirot with tears in her eyes. The dagger was placed in a secure case, to be returned to the crypt under stricter protection. Poirot watched as it was locked away, his mind already turning to the next mystery. For now, though, he allowed himself a moment of satisfaction, his mustache perfectly aligned, as he sipped a cup of tea in the morning light. But the story was not quite over. As Poirot and Hastings prepared to leave, a servant approached, holding a small envelope. "Monsieur Poirot, this was found in the library, among the ashes. Poirot opened it, his eyes narrowing as he read the single line within. The society watches, and the dagger's curse endures. He folded the note, tucking it into his pocket. Hastings, he said softly, it seems our work is not yet done. And with that, Hercule Poirot stepped into the waiting car, his mind already weaving the threads of the next chapter in this intricate tapestry of deception. Chapter 9. The betrayal unmasked. The night air clung to Poirot's coat like a damp shroud. As he approached the warehouse on the outskirts of the nearby town, the building loomed ahead, its weathered timbers sagging under the weight of years. Its windows dark save for a faint flicker of light seeping through a crack in the boarded-up facade. The tracker he had discreetly slipped into Dr. Mortimer's coat pocket had led him here, to this forgotten corner where secrets were traded in whispers and shadows. His polished shoes crunched softly on the gravel path, each step measured, deliberate, as his gray cells worked at a feverish pace, piecing together the puzzle of the hidden dagger. The warehouse stood at the edge of a disused industrial yard, surrounded by rusted machinery and overgrown weeds. The faint hum of a distant train mingled with the rustle of leaves, but otherwise, the night was still to still, as if the world held its breath in anticipation of what was to come. Poirot paused at the corner of the building, his gloved hand resting lightly on the rough wooden wall. He adjusted his hat, ensuring it sat perfectly aligned, and listened. From within came the low murmur of voices, urgent and clipped, carrying the weight of conspiracy. Mon Dieu, Poirot murmured to himself, his mustache twitching with the thrill of the chase. The stage is set, and the players are unaware that Hercule Poirot is in the audience. He crept closer to the cracked window, positioning himself to peer through the sliver of light inside. The dim glow of a single lantern illuminated the figures. Dr. Mortimer, his gaunt face taut with nervous energy, and Lady Eleanor Ashford, her elegant posture unmistakable even in the shadows. She stood with her back to a stack of crates, her voice sharp as she spoke. Though the words were muffled by the thick walls, Poirot's eyes narrowed. Lady Eleanor, the cunning sister of Lord Reginald, whose charm had masked a calculating mind. He had suspected her involvement, but to see her here, in this clandestine meeting, confirmed the web of deceit he had begun to unravel. He strained to hear, catching fragments of their conversation. The dagger, too valuable. Society will pay. Dr. Mortimer's voice trembled. A mix of fear and greed. Lady Eleanor's response was colder, commanding. No mistakes, Mortimer. We cannot afford exposure. Poirot's lips curled into a faint smile. The dagger, that elusive relic tied to the Ashford family's cursed legacy, was at the heart of this plot, just as he had deduced. But who was pulling the strings? Was Lady Eleanor the mastermind, or was she, too, a pawn in a larger game? Poirot adjusted his position, careful not to disturb the gravel beneath his feet. He needed more evidence, not just whispers. The warehouse door, slightly ajar, beckoned. Slipping around to the entrance, he eased it open just enough to glide through. His movements silent, practiced. The interior smelled of damp wood and oil. The air heavy with the weight of secrets. Crates and barrels lined the walls, creating a labyrinth of shadows. The lantern's light cast long, flickering shapes across the floor, and Poirot moved cautiously, keeping to the darkness. He positioned himself behind a stack of crates, close enough to hear clearly now. Dr. Mortimer was pacing, his hands wringing together. The society will meet us at midnight, he said, his voice slow but urgent. They've promised a fortune, Eleanor, but they're dangerous. If we're caught, we won't be caught. Lady Eleanor snapped, her tone cutting through the air like a blade. She stepped into the light, her emerald gown catching the glow, her eyes sharp with determination. You've done your part, Mortimer. The dagger is secure, and the buyer is ready. All you need to do is keep your nerve. Poirot's mind raced. A secret society, a buyer, a fortune. The pieces were falling into place, but the puzzle was not yet complete. The dagger, which he had traced from the manor's crypt to the abandoned mill, was clearly more than a relic. Its value lay not just in its history, but in what it represented: a key to power, perhaps, or a symbol coveted by those who traded in the shadows. And Lady Eleanor, with her impeccable manners and sharp intellect, had orchestrated the scheme. Using Dr. Mortimer's obsession with the dagger's lore as her leverage, he edged closer, his eyes scanning the crates for any sign of the dagger itself. A glint of metal caught his attention, a small safe tucked in the corner, its lock gleaming under the lantern's light. Could it be? Poirot's heart quickened, but he forced himself to remain calm. Haste was the enemy of precision. He needed to act, but first, he needed to know the full scope of their plan. The conversation shifted. Charles was a problem, Lady Eleanor said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. His debts made him desperate, but he's been dealt with. The fire in the library ensured that. Dr. Mortimer stopped pacing, his face pale. You set the fire. Of course, she replied, her tone almost casual. The documents were too dangerous. They linked the dagger to the society, and Charles was too weak to keep silent. He would have sold us out. Poirot's fingers tightened around his cane. The fire in the manor's library, which he and Hastings had narrowly escaped, was no accident. It was a calculated move to destroy evidence, to bury the truth. And Charles, the nephew who had confessed to being coerced by an unknown figure, was a victim of Lady Eleanor's ruthlessness. The betrayal was deeper than he had imagined. He knew he could not wait longer. The midnight meeting with the secret society was approaching, and if the dagger changed hands, it might vanish forever. Along with the truth, Poirot stepped out from behind the crates, his presence sudden and commanding. "Bonsoir, Lady Eleanor." "Dr. Mortimer," he said, his voice calm but laced with steel. "It is most unfortunate for you that Hercule Poirot has overheard your little tete-a-tete." The effect was instantaneous. Dr. Mortimer gasped, stumbling backward, his hand clutching at his coat. Lady Eleanor's composure faltered for a fraction of a second before her eyes narrowed, calculating. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, her voice smooth but edged with danger. "How unexpected." "Unexpected, perhaps, but not unwelcome," Poirot replied, his mustache twitching with a faint smile. "The dagger, it seems, has drawn many into its web, but Hercule Poirot is not so easily ensnared. Tell me, Lady Eleanor, why go to such lengths? The Ashford estate is grand, your position secure. What drives you to this treachery?" Lady Eleanor's lips curled into a cold smile. "You think the small, Poirot. The dagger is not just a relic. It is a key to influence, to wealth beyond the crumbling walls of my brother's manor. The society values it, and they pay handsomely for what they value. And you, Dr. Mortimer?" Poirot turned to the historian, whose face was now slick with sweat. "Your obsession with the dagger is more merely a facade for greed," Mortimer stammered, his eyes darting to Lady Eleanor as if seeking rescue. "I only wanted to protect it, to study it. She made me believe we could silence you, fool." Lady Eleanor hissed, but Poirot raised a hand, his gaze unwavering. "There is no need for further deception," he said. "The game is over. The dagger, I presume, isn't that safe?" He gestured toward the corner, his tone leaving no room for denial. Lady Eleanor's eyes flashed with defiance, but before she could respond, the warehouse door burst open, and a group of men in dark coats stormed in the secret society. No doubt, arriving for their prize. Chaos erupted. Dr. Mortimer shouted, scrambling toward the safe, while Lady Eleanor lunged for a crate, pulling a small pistol from her handbag. Poirot, however, was prepared. With a swift motion, he tapped his cane against a nearby barrel. The sound sharp and deliberate from the shadows outside. The local police, whom Poirot had alerted before entering the warehouse, surged forward. Inspector Japp, a familiar face from Scotland Yard, led the charge, his voice booming as he ordered the intruders to stand down. Stay where you are, Japp barked. His men fanning out to secure the warehouse. Lady Eleanor froze, her pistol still in hand. But the fight drained from her as she saw the futility of resistance. Dr. Mortimer collapsed to his knees, muttering apologies, while the society members, caught off guard, were swiftly apprehended. Poirot approached the safe, his movements unhurried. With Japp's assistance, he opened it, revealing the dagger nestled within a velvet-lined case. Its blade gleamed in the lantern's light, intricate engravings catching the eye, a relic of beauty and danger. Poirot lifted it carefully, his gloved hand steady. The hidden dagger, he said softly, no longer hidden. As the police secured Lady Eleanor and Dr. Mortimer, Poirot pieced together the final threads of the case for Japp. Lady Eleanor had orchestrated the theft. Using her brother's estate as a stage for her ambition, she had manipulated Dr. Mortimer's scholarly obsession and Charles's financial desperation, setting the library fire to cover her tracks. The secret society, a shadowy group of collectors, had been her buyers, lured by the dagger's myth and its promise of power. But why, Poirot? Japp asked, scratching his head as they stood outside the warehouse, the night air cool against their faces. Why risk it all? Poirot's eyes twinkled. Greed, mon ami, is a powerful motivator. But so, too, is pride. Lady Eleanor believed she could outwit us all. She forgot that Hercule Poirot sees what others do not. The dagger was secured, to be returned to the Ashford estate under strict protection. Lady Eleanor and Dr. Mortimer faced justice, their scheme unraveled by Poirot's relentless pursuit of truth. As the police vans drove away, Poirot adjusted his hat, his mustache perfectly twirled, and turned toward the town's lights. Ready to return to the manor and close the case, the journey back was quiet. The countryside cloaked in darkness. Poirot's mind, however, was alight with satisfaction. The dagger, a symbol of the Ashford family's tangled history, would soon rest where it belonged, its secrets laid bare, and Hercule Poirot, as always, had ensured that order was restored. Chapter 10. The dagger's rest. Morning sun cast a golden glow over the sprawling estate of Lord Reginald Ashford, its rays filtering through the ancient oaks that lined the gravel path leading to the manor. Hercule Poirot walked with a measured stride, his polished shoes crunching softly against the stones, his cane tapping a steady rhythm. Beside him, Captain Arthur Hastings, ever the loyal companion, adjusted his hat and glanced at Poirot with a mix of admiration and curiosity. "A fine morning, Poirot," Hastings remarked, his voice bright despite the weight of the past days. "Events. You've done it again, haven't you? Unraveled the whole tangled mess." Poirot's mustache twitched upward, a faint smile playing at the corners of his lips. "Mon ami, the affair of the hidden dagger was, as always, a matter of order and method. The little gray cells, they do not fail me." He paused, his green eyes glinting with satisfaction. "But come, we have one final task before we bid adieu to this most intriguing manor." The two men approached the grand entrance of Ashford Manor, its towering doors framed by ivy that clung to the weathered stone. The events of the past days had left the household in a state of uneasy calm. Lady Eleanor and Dr. Mortimer, unmasked as the conspirators behind the theft of the legendary dagger, were now in the custody of the local constabulary, their schemes laid bare by Poirot's relentless pursuit of truth. The dagger itself, a relic of gleaming steel inscribed with cryptic runes, rested securely in Poirot's leather satchel, its weight a reminder of the secrets it had guarded for centuries. Inside the manor, the remaining guests and staff had gathered. In the grand drawing room, their faces a mixture of relief, curiosity, and lingering suspicion. The air was thick with the scent of polished wood and fresh flowers, arranged hastily by the maids to restore a sense of normalcy. Lord Reginald Ashford stood by the fireplace, his broad shoulders slumped slightly, the strain of recent betrayals etched into his features. Beside him, Miss Clara, the shy governess whose connection to the Dagger's history had been a pivotal revelation, clutched a handkerchief, her eyes bright with gratitude. Charles, Lord Ashford's nephew, stood apart, his expression a mix of shame and resignation. His role in the plot now exposed, but his intentions mitigated by coercion. Poirot entered the room with his characteristic poise, his small, meticulous frame commanding attention. He set his satchel on a mahogany table and raised a hand for silence. The murmurs ceased, and all eyes turned to the diminutive detective. Mesdames et messieurs, Poirot began, his voice clear and resonant. We have come to the end of this most curious affair. The dagger, this relic of the Ashford family, has been recovered, and the truth behind its disappearance has been brought to light. But there remains one final duty to ensure that this artifact, so steeped in myth and mystery, is returned to its rightful place, free from the shadows of deceit. Lord Ashford stepped forward, his voice steady but tinged with emotion. Monsieur Poirot, you have done this house a great service. The dagger has been a burden as much as a treasure. I would hear your plan for its safekeeping. Poirot inclined his head, acknowledging the Lord's words. The dagger. It is not merely an object of beauty or value, none. It is a symbol of the Ashford legacy, but also of the truths that bind a family, the myth of its curse, perpetuated through generations, was but a clever ruse to protect it from those who would exploit its power. Today, we shall lay the myth to rest. He opened the satchel and carefully withdrew the dagger, its blade catching the light in a dazzling arc. The guests gasped softly, some leaning forward to catch a glimpse of the fabled relic. The hilt, intricately carved with vines and runes, seemed to pulse with a quiet energy, as if aware of its own significance. The crypt, Poirot continued, is the dagger's true home. Beneath the chapel, in the heart of this estate, it shall be, secured in a new lock, one designed to withstand the greed and ambition that sought to claim it. But first, we must address the final threads of this mystery. He turned to Clara, his expression softening. Mademoiselle Clara, your courage in revealing the truth about your mother's connection to this house was most admirable. The locket, the sketch, the secrets you bore, they were the keys to unlocking this puzzle. You are cleared of all suspicion, and I trust you will find peace in knowing the truth has been honored. Clara's eyes welled with tears, and she nodded, unable to speak. Poirot's gaze then shifted to Charles, who straightened under the detective's scrutiny. And you, Monsieur Charles, Poirot said, his tone firm, but not unkind. You were drawn into a web not entirely of your own making. The debts, the threats, they clouded your judgment. Mays we? But you have cooperated, and the truth has spared you from greater consequences. I trust you will learn from this, and that the Ashford name will be carried with honor henceforth. Charles swallowed hard, his voice low. I will, Monsieur Poirot. I swear it. Poirot nodded, satisfied, and turned to the gathered group. Now, let us proceed to the crypt. The dagger must be returned, and the chapter closed. The procession to the chapel was a solemn affair, the guests following Poirot and Lord Ashford through the manor's winding corridors and out into the crisp morning air. The chapel, a stone structure nestled among ancient yews, stood as a silent sentinel, its stained glass windows casting colorful patterns on the grass. Hastings carried a small wooden box containing the new lock, a sturdy mechanism crafted by a local blacksmith at Poirot's precise specifications. Inside the chapel, the air was cool and musty, the scent of old stone mingling with the faint sweetness of incense. Poirot led the way to the crypt's entrance, a narrow staircase descending into shadow. The group followed, their footsteps echoing in the confined space, until they reached the sealed tomb where Poirot had first discovered the empty casket. The altar slab, heavy and worn, had been replaced after its earlier disturbance, and now it stood ready to conceal the dagger once more. Poirot gestured to Hastings, who handed him the new lock. With careful precision, Poirot fitted it into a reinforced compartment beneath the altar, ensuring the mechanism was secure. He then placed the dagger within a velvet-lined case, its blade gleaming one final time before he closed the lid, and locked it with a decisive click. "There, Poirot said, stepping back. "The dagger rests, and with it, the myths that have haunted this family. Let it be a reminder, Zamis, that truth is the greatest treasure, more enduring than any relic." Lord Ashford placed a hand on the altar, his voice thick with gratitude. "Thank you, Monsieur Poirot. This estate, this family, we owe you more than words can express." Poirot waved a hand dismissively, though his eyes twinkled with pleasure. "It is my profession. Lord Ashford, the little gray cells, they demand." Such exercises as the group ascended from the crypt, the mood lightened, the weight of the past days lifting like the morning mist. Back in the manor, a table had been set with tea and scones, a small gesture of normalcy after the chaos. Poirot and Hastings settled into cushioned chairs, the warmth of the tea soothing after the chill of the crypt. Hastings sipped his tea, glancing at Poirot with a grin. "You know, Poirot, I thought for a moment we'd lose you in that maze, or in the warehouse. You've a knack for getting out of tight spots." Poirot chuckled, adjusting his mustache. "Moaned Cher Hastings, the tight spots, they are but opportunities for the mind to shine. The maze, the ambush, the fire all were but distractions from the truth. And the truth, it always reveals itself to Hercule Poirot." They sat in companionable silence, watching the guests disperse, some returning to their rooms, others preparing to depart the estate. Clara approached, her face radiant with a newfound confidence. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, "I've decided to stay on at the manor, to help Lord Ashford rebuild what's been lost. Your faith in me, it's given me a purpose." Poirot inclined his head. "Mademoiselle, you have the heart of a lion. The manor is fortunate to have you." As Clara walked away, Hastings leaned closer. "What's next, Poirot? Another case? Another mystery?" Poirot's eyes sparkled with mischief. "Perhaps, mon ami. The world, it is full of mysteries waiting for Hercule Poirot. But for now, I shall enjoy this tea, this moment of calm. The gray cells, they deserve a rest." The sun climbed higher, bathing the manor in light. Poirot rose, brushing a speck of dust from his impeccable coat, and stepped outside. The gravel path stretched before him, leading away from Ashford Manor toward new horizons. With a final twirl of his mustache, he set off, his mind already turning to the next challenge, the next truth waiting to be uncovered. And so, under the morning sun, Hercule Poirot walked. The case of the hidden dagger closed. His legacy as the master of mysteries as bright as ever.